You have to learn sign language in order to minimize. And bravo on not scheduling a department update. Good job.
Well, I think it was Ken. Yeah,
That's right.
it's supposed to be, but, or no, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was supposed to be, okay, Director Friday, wait about. Mostly, I just think for the sake of everybody who's here, right?
Caroline, are we good? Okay. Okay. Oops, that wasn't good. You did.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for November 3rd, 2022. It is 10:02 in the morning. And Commissioner Starrett, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic under God, indivisible, with liberty and
All right. Item C is our calendar session. I don't think we had anything to add. Carolina sent that around, other than daylight savings time ends on Sunday, this Sunday. So, other than that, anybody have anything to add?
I don't have anything.
No?
more to add.
Okay.
Chair, thank you.
Okay, item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. We did receive some written public comment for today. I don't know if we are prepared to address some of the issues in there. I know that our clerk is following up directly about that. But can we state for the record that the Newburgh special election is December 20th, is in fact?
Oh, it is, okay.
Okay,
It
I had
is,
not
and
gotten that.
that's posted on the main page of the county website and also on the clerk's page. And I know the clerk is working on notices and a lot of the information in there. If there's more specific questions, I kind of leave it to the clerk to respond to that. But
Okay.
my only thoughts are based on the directive and the information and the communication plan that was put together with the city and the county. The information's posted on the website.
okay. Sounds good. And then if there's any other public comments, if you're in the audience and you have comment on something that is not on the agenda, please come forward. If you are on virtually, please raise your virtual hand so we can bring you in. It looks like Mr. Lampman. Is that Jason?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, that's his first name. If that's
Hello?
his first name,
This is-
which probably is.
Jason, if you can hear me, you're up for public comment.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
And we can't hear your audio.
Hmm.
Okay, so we lost Jason there.
Oh, I think he's also state 3.
Can you hear me?
Jason, are you state 3? Is that yours?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We still can't hear your audio.
Oh, you muted now.
Can you hear me?
It seems like if he's dropping off, he's probably having connection problems on his end, so. Okay, well,
Maybe we can encourage him
We
to
can-
submit some
yeah.
testimony.
we can reach out and ask him to.
Yeah.
Here, well, it's on our end. I had somebody just shot me a message and they
Oh.
could hear on the webinar. We just can't hear. on the
Oh, okay.
Okay. Do we want to pause? Okay, sorry, Jason, if you're listening, we are having some technical difficulties on our end, so we just can't hear you. So if you want to email in your testimony, that would be great too.
And in light of the fact that we have 2 public hearings on the agenda for today and we have remote participation,
We'll need to.
we may need to recess
Just spell check,
and
yeah.
work on our technical
Mhm.
issues here before we go into the next item. We could always go back to the public comment period if,
Okay.
if the board would like to. But we'll continue to work on trying to troubleshoot this.
Okay, so we want to recess now or before the public hearing? I don't really see anybody who. I think all those folks are for the public hearing, so.
Chair, I think it would be good to, I think we
Nobody else
could
had that
go
in
through
mind.
it and then through the agenda up to hearings and then recess
And
it.
see what we can do.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, for the record, we are having trouble hearing virtual public testimony. So if you are on and you wanted to submit public testimony, please send an email or I will go back to it at the end of our agenda. We can try again if there's anybody. Okay, item E is department updates. We have nothing today. Item F is a work session. There is nothing. Nothing on the consent agenda, also nothing under old business item H, which brings us to item I, other business. Item I1 is consideration of approval of a grant agreement between Yamhill County and Willamette Workforce Partnership where the Yamhill County Fiscal Recovery Fund, YCFRF, Business Direct Impact Competitive Grant Program in the amount of $5,000 effective November 1st, 2022 through October 31st of 2023. And so this came out of our ARPA discussion for the recruitment and retention grants.
Correct, yeah. And so based on board direction, we reached out to Willamette Workforce Partnership, had a discussion. We did make a small modification on how the grant program is going to roll out. It'll look similar to like we're doing with SEDCOR, which Willamette Workforce Partnership is going to do the solicitations, get all the applications, put together a review committee, prepare recommendations, but then those recommendations will come back before the board for approval. And so the amount that we have here is to offset their administrative costs for doing that. And we have funds accounted for within that portion that can cover those
Right.
costs. So.
And it looks like they'll be doing the marketing too of letting
Correct.
people know that it's out there. So that's
Correct.
good. Okay, so I will, if there's no further questions or discussion, I will move approval of item I1.
And then
Um,
during the further discussion, I will say,
further
it's
discussion.
it's really good to see this come before us. And with thanks to Workforce Partnership, EDAC, Abisha and Carrie right,
Mhm.
and Ken on this. So lots of folks, you probably even had some part of it. So, but it's great to be at this spot.
Absolutely. Okay,
And I will say that I know that a slightly tighter, narrower version of something like this, Marion County's been doing over the past couple of years with the Workforce Partnership. And so it, I feel confident because I know they know how to do it.
Yeah,
That's
and they
it.
had a lot of success with their youth wage grant program. too,
Yeah.
so.
That's right.
Okay, if there's nothing further, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, item 2 is consideration of approval of a contract employment agreement between Yamhill County and Rhonda Jasco to provide pre-employment background investigation services at the rate of $45 per hour retroactive to September 27th, 2022 through June 30th of 2023 with auto renewal. And it sounds like this is needed because the background checks for law enforcement personnel are becoming a bit more specialized. And we just have some labor constraints in that.
Right,
regard.
that's correct. And then I think they had 2 other individuals and one of them has been able to provide less, they're not as available as they were
Yeah.
expected to be. So this is
Yeah.
helping to backfill that need.
Okay. I will move approval of item I2. Is there further discussion or questions?
No chair.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I3 is consideration of approval in the matter of resolution 22-11-03-1 proclaiming November as National Runaway Prevention Month in Yamhill County. And this was added by Commissioner Starrett.
Chair, with the board's permission, in the interest of time, I won't read the resolution, but I would like to say
Yeah.
a little bit about this. As you know, we're seeing an increase in the number of young people who are in the homeless situation and are at serious risk for drug addiction and all kinds of problems down the line. I do want to call out that YCAP and Youth Outreach have had about 1,000 contacts with 99 runaway and homeless youths in the last year. That's a lot for a county our size. And they've provided food, shelter, clothing, ability to get their social security numbers and licenses and all kinds of things. And they've also, through the Youth Drop-In Center, helped 253 kids who are not included in that number. And we are going to be getting a youth outreach center in McMinnville. So I'm very grateful for this. And we have to be cognizant that these kids really need some help. So I would move approval of the resolution 22-11-03-1.
And it's in the agenda
you.
packet too, and which is
Yes.
not a terribly long packet, so people can look at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you for your leadership
Mhm.
in this regard. And obviously mentorship is something that is continually a struggle. We seem to have kind of lost that in
Yeah.
society, and that's very sad because that's a key to keeping these kids healthy and safe. So. Okay, Commissioner Starrett moves approval of item I3. If there's no further
No
discussion,
chair.
all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, so,
Yeah, so if we could just take a recess, I have IT on their way over
Okay.
here to take a look at it. So we, hopefully we're talking 10-15 minutes at the most.
okay, sounds good. So we will recess until, we'll try for 10:30.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Apologies, everybody.
Yes.
We need to hear those people up there. The crowd goes wild.
So, and there's a lot of really fun stuff going around. I can see it. It's a room like this. I appreciate your understanding.
We sound like everyone would die.
But yeah, as we're out, actually, a lot of people is, yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, I can't even imagine. There, you know, I'm close to the district. So the issue is.
Noelle, can you hear me? Can you say something?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Because it should be the stream PC. You want to show him what you usually.
Can you hear me?
Can we reboot without shutting down the meetings? Well, that's the computer, I think.
Because I should.
We're in.
But yeah, I think we should.
I just don't know if it's gonna, it shouldn't disrupt the Zoom.
Yeah, right, yeah.
YouTube is through the PC.
Yeah.
Nothing's
John.
connected.
I don't want to.
Yeah, see, they can hear. Yeah, you can help do that.
Come. Children.
Everything in that. They're gonna be. That's right. Yep. They don't care.
Carolina.
You see that cat underneath that car? Oh, what are you talking about? But now.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Something? Carolina? Carolina? Are you able to hear me?
Ken's is definitely on.
Should I stop talking now?
Yay, Noelle.
Okay, I'm guessing it works.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome, bye.
It's just been like reading something.
If you promote her, remove permission to talk.
Okay, so we are coming back into formal session. It is 10:25. And so we're not concerned about our audio in the rest of the video, correct? People could hear us, we just couldn't hear. Okay,
Yeah, it's a function inside the room where
Okay.
we just couldn't hear. Everyone else could hear on Zoom and YouTube and
Okay.
everywhere else. It was just in-room audio
Gotcha.
issues.
okay. Well, I think before we go to the public hearing, I will call one more time for public testimony since we couldn't quite get there earlier. So if you're in the audience and you have public testimony on anything that is not on the agenda or part of the land use hearings, or if you're online, please raise your virtual hand to offer public testimony. Okay, hearing none, we will move forward to item J, which is our public hearings. Item J1 is docket number C-11-22 /SDR-22-22, a conditional use permit and site design review request for a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use for the rental of the on-site winery and tasting room in conjunction with an agricultural use for 6 events, such as parties, receptions, and banquets, with the primary intent of indirect promotion of the wine grapes harvested and processed on site. This request also includes a consolidation of the existing conditions of approval governing the operation of the wine production facility or winery and on-site tasting room with conditions that included operating hours from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. during the summer and 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. during fall, winter, and spring, and the hosting of 6 events per year with a maximum attendance of 100 guests. The applicant is appealing a condition of approval placed by the planning department that prohibits the use of amplified voice or sound in conjunction with the operation of the winery and tasting room. This is regarding tax lot 3327-02000. The applicant is Furioso Vineyard Dundee LLC. The appellant is Giorgio Furioso, and this has been continued from October 6th of 2022, and we are reopening this at the point of staff recommendation.
Thank you, Chair Bershauer. And the staff recommendation, based on the testimony and evidence in the record, the applicant has successfully demonstrated that the request to modify the conditions of approval for the operation of the winery and tasting room are consistent with the county's comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions of approval. Condition number 1, the development shall substantially conform to the site plan submitted in docket SDR-17-16. The site plan titled Layout Plan and Paving Plan, and the winery operations shall substantially conform to those operations described in the application narrative submitted with this application, docket C-11-22/SDR-22-22. Condition number 2, the applicant shall obtain all permits required by the Department of Environmental Quality, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. Condition number 3, all outside storage shall be screened from neighboring parcels. Condition number 4, the subject parcel shall host no more than 6 events per year. An individual event shall not exceed 100 persons or 50 vehicles. A traffic management plan shall be submitted for approval to the Planning Department and the Public Works Department prior to hosting an event. Condition number 5, all building permits necessary for construction or expansion of the winery or tasting room or conversion of any existing building for use as a winery or tasting room shall be obtained from the Yamhill County Building Department. Condition number 6, prior to initiation of the wine production or wine tasting operation, unless already recorded, the landowner shall sign an affidavit acknowledging the following declaratory statement and record it in the deed and mortgage records for Yamhill County. And that's as follows. The subject property is located in an area designated by Yamhill County for agricultural uses. It is a county policy to protect agricultural operations from conflicting land uses in such designated areas. Accepted agricultural practices in this area may create inconveniences for the owners or occupants of this property. However, Yamhill County does not consider it the agricultural operator's responsibility to modify accepted practices to accommodate the owner or occupants of this property, with the exception of such operators' violation of state law. Condition number 7, pursuant to section 1006.07 sub A of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance, the use shall be allowed a single sign not to exceed 24 square feet in area, subject to permit approval. Condition number 8, the winery shall be limited to a production of no more than 50,000 gallons per year. Condition number 9, parking shall be established and permanently maintained as long as the winery or tasting room is operating so that there is a minimum of 1 parking space per 100 square feet of tasting room space plus 1 parking space for each employee on maximum working shift pursuant to section 1007 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Parking shall not be permitted on the access easement or along the Northeast Warden Hill Road, Northeast Warren Road, or Northeast Fairview Drive right-of-way. Condition number 10, the use of outdoor amplified music or sound shall not be permitted. Condition number 11, any lighting used for illumination shall be placed, shielded, or deflected so as not to shine onto adjacent dwellings or create excessive glare on adjacent roadways. Condition number 12, the on-premise food cart shall be removed from the subject parcel. Food carts and on-premise restaurants shall be prohibited until such time as the subject parcel or tract qualifies as a large winery as defined by Oregon Revised Statute 215.453 or other suitable land use approval is obtained. Condition number 13, the construction of any additional structures or modification of the footprint of existing structures used in conjunction with the winery or tasting room shall require the submission and approval of a site design review application. Condition 14, modification of any of the above conditions requires approval under section 1202.05 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Violation of any of the above conditions may result in revocation of the conditional use permit with the process detailed in section 1202.07 and 1202.08 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. And that concludes the recommended conditions of approval.
Thank you, Lance. Can you actually repeat the additional or added number 12,
Yes.
condition number 12?
Condition number 12 reads as follows. The on-premise food cart shall be removed from the subject parcel. Food carts and on-premise restaurants shall be prohibited until such time as the subject parcel or tract qualifies as a large winery as defined by Oregon Revised Statute 215.453 or other suitable land use approval is obtained.
Okay, so just for clarification, what determines a quote unquote large winery?
Usually it has to have 40, well, Lance is looking up, it usually has to have 40 acres of grapes planted and have a certain size of production. Is it 150,000 gallons, 100,000 gallons, I think?
Yeah. So the winery, there's several criteria that have to be satisfied. The winery owns and is sited on a tract of 80 acres or more, at least 50 acres of which is a vineyard. The winery owns at least 80 additional acres of planted vineyards in Oregon that need not be contiguous to the acreage described in paragraph A, which I just read. The winery has produced annually at the same or a different location at least 150,000 gallons of wine in the last 3 of the 5 calendar years before the winery is established under the section. So then it goes on to list some of the additional rights that a large winery is granted, but those are probably the bigger criteria that have to be addressed.
Okay, and then I'm not sure it's relevant that we know how Furioso compares to that, but what's the process if they were deemed a large winery? What's the process to get a food cart there?
So one of the rights that's granted to a large winery is the operation of a restaurant. They would come to us with a site design review to qualify under that statute.
And then a clarification too, if that, because they have a conditional use permit, correct, in order to operate a winery,
Mhm.
that's separate, is that separate from the large winery, small winery categorization? Because those are permitted use wineries that just require a site design review.
Yeah, that's right. So when we've permitted in the past a winery as a conditional use because they fell under 15 acres of planted grapes, some winery operators will come to us several years later and they've now brought their vineyard up above 15. They'll submit a site design review to qualify what had previously been approved as a conditional use as a permitted use. So it would be a similar sort of process.
Okay, so if Furioso felt like they were meeting those conditions, or meeting the requirements for a large winery, then they could do the same thing.
Yeah.
Or they could do the small winery.
Yeah, that's right.
Not have the condition of the process over.
That's right. And we would notify surrounding property owners and everyone would have a chance to comment and be aware that they were wanting to qualify.
Okay, thanks. Oh, I turned it off for a discussion with Christian. Whoops.
Okay, so that
Thank you.
concludes the staff recommendation. Thank you, Lance. Are there any questions for Lance or Ken?
And the one question I do have is that I haven't been able to get my hands on the conditions that you read. And they're not in any of the documents here or in the packet. And that's just my mistake that I haven't asked you for that, but it does feel like we should have them. If possible.
Yeah, I apologize for not getting
Oh.
those to you sooner.
And I think Lance, it was probably because we have this little window
Mhm.
onto the issue, right?
Yeah, and I'm happy to pass those by you guys if you'd like.
Yeah, they're all the same as the original 13 conditions, other than the food cart edition is my take.
The one from 2007.
The very first under staff recommendation in the front.
I don't think that I have. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have them in mind.
Okay. Maybe there.
Okay, no, I got what you're talking about. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
All right.
so I'm gonna close out the hearing and open us up for deliberation. So I just want to start out with kind of some clarifying comments because the hearing on October 6th was a bit bumpy, a little bit messy. And so I wanted to make sure that since the applicant or the appellant withdrew their appeal a few days before the hearing. However, we were still intending to hold the hearing and that was sort of known to the public. We did hold the hearing and Mrs. Seeberger and some others came forward and made it known that they wanted to appeal this. So it is our practice to go ahead and move forward as though there is an active appeal.
Yes, and Jody can correct me if I'm mistaken on any of this, but the hearing, there was an appeal submitted by the applicant, hearing scheduled for October 6th. We sent out notice of the hearing, received comments in opposition that were beyond what the applicant had appealed on, which was the amplified music. And the applicants on September 30th, less than a week before the hearing, Furiosa Winery withdrew their appeal. And while in the past we have thought that, well, that means that it goes back to when the director issued the decision. In actuality, then it resets the clock to September 30th, and someone can submit an appeal on September 30th for an additional 15 days. And instead of canceling the hearing and trying to see if anyone wanted to appeal and resetting it, we reached out to the folks that were parties, let them know that there was a request to withdraw this, and one of the property owners in the area then submitted an appeal. And so that's the appeal that we have before us today.
Okay.
That sounded good to me. So essentially, Ken's original decision after the appeal was withdrawn, it became official on the day that the appeal was withdrawn, which that's when the 15-day time period would kick off. That is our interpretation of Indian Memorial case
Okay.
law. So that's why the
Okay.
appellant had time to appeal.
Okay. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was clear because I had someone come visit me after that hearing and say, well, I'm not sure what you mean by, we have deadlines for a reason. My concern was that I want to make sure we're not providing a special path for someone over someone else, because we have to be consistent. So if that was how my comments were construed or interpreted, I want to be clear that it was not about the content of the appeal. It was about the process. So Okay, so to kind of set the table, we are now considering all 14 conditions. It's not only applicable to the amplified sound, correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair. And you could always add or modify any of the conditions that I suggested as well.
Okay,
Excuse me, Chair, with the exclusion of the food cart. Because that's not tied, that is basically tied to an entirely different process.
Yeah, you know, that's the way we interpret it, that the food cart is, you know, a restaurant, and that if they wanted to get approval for that, they'd either have to do a zone change or qualify as a large winery.
Okay, thank you.
but that condition does have an immediate impact because they do have a permanent food cart on their site right
Right,
now.
that's what
so.
I mean.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
It would also have an immediate impact because my understanding is that amplified music is currently allowed under there. So the modified one doesn't allow. Is that accurate?
Actually, I would say no.
Okay.
That, you know, the applicant's attorney, you know, has maintained that, well, you know, they've had amplified music, and in reviewing the decision on the site design review that we previously had done in 2016, you know, that was a site design to enlarge their operation, to have a larger crush pad. Really didn't say anything about amplified music, either approving it or denying it. And
Okay.
I would maintain that, you know, we did not approve, and I haven't found anything that we approved amplified music. They just have done it. And in doing so, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have approved it. You know, I don't think that we're modifying or having anything different by putting down that there's no amplified music. If they'd like to do that, then there's an agritourism way that you can do it one time a year. So there's a method to do that, but these are very similar conditions to what we put on other conditionally used wineries.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
I did have a question about amplified music. Is this something that we do typically allow?
No, you know, the winery conditions have morphed over the years. Partly, and I would also say bed and breakfast applications have
Right.
morphed over the years because of differing expectations on the part of applicants.
Mhm.
And, you know, in the 90s, when we were approving wineries, our approvals were silent on that because, no pun intended, because you know, we weren't having that as an issue. The only winery that was doing that was Sokolblosser did it as mass gatherings and came to the board and would have 3,000 person mass gatherings at an amphitheater that was kind of naturally on their property. But otherwise, we didn't have that as an issue. Well, as the wineries have come into the area and become more sophisticated, we've had to place conditions like that on the approvals, just to let them know, you know, hey, if you're going to do something like this, and if you want to do events, you can do it. Just you have to go through the process. And same with a bed and breakfast. When we were doing approvals for bed and breakfast in the 80s and 90s, the idea was that you just had a house that had a couple of extra rooms you wanted to let out so you could meet people that were traveling in the area. And now when we do bed and breakfast, a lot of times folks have the idea that, well, I'll do events and I'll do weddings and I'll do large gatherings and I will do, you know, whatever. And I'll just use this barn that was approved for agricultural use only and doesn't have appropriate, you know, lighting or exits. I'll just, you know, have people in there. And so we've had to be a little more proactive in our conditions, and I don't want to be that way. You know, I want to just let it go, but we have to kind of call those things out now because new owners come in, they presume that they can do something because they've seen it on TV or they've had it in other jurisdictions. And so we're trying to be more specific about what really is being approved.
Okay,
Excuse me, Chair, I have one
Mhm.
question. So since this is complaint driven regarding amplified music, a lot of times when that's a condition and folks just do it and continue to do it, it sort of becomes what they do. And without that complaint, we don't know and we can't follow up. So I think it's important to let people know that it's going to come from that.
Okay, and then in my understanding of Sokol Blosser, that was back in with the nineties when they were doing that, and ODOT is the one who came in and basically shut them down because of traffic issues and.
I didn't think they got shut down. There were traffic issues, but my understanding was they were hiring the sheriff's office deputies to manage the traffic. And I didn't know it got shut down. I thought they just got tired of doing it and moved on. But I honestly did not follow that closely because it's a mass gathering. It's not a land use thing that comes before us. So I don't pretend to know all the backstory on that.
Okay. So we did see something come through about Youngberg Hill and a complaint about acoustic music there. So what's happened, just for context, what's happening there?
Youngberg Hill has an approval from 1987 or 88 for events, and have been doing it years before we had any sort of noise ordinance. So they're a non-conforming use that is allowed to have events for up to 300 people, as I recall, and can have music.
Okay. Do we have others throughout the county that you know of that are like that?
I think that Water Oasis has music that's allowed to 9:30. That's the only other one I can think of. And for the record, the planning department recommended denial on Water Oasis, and it went to the Board of Commissioners, and the board approved it. Previous board, a long time ago, approved it as a home occupation that had those conditions on it. So it's one of those that got through the process and got approved.
Interesting.
Okay. Okay.
And then I have another question.
Go ahead.
So the proposed modifications of their conditional use permit and site design review. One of the things that's new is moving from 3 events to 6 events. Is that accurate? Okay. And was that Lance might know more about this. Was that the original impetus for this? Was that what initiated the modification? Was that event?
I think that was probably one of the key points of it. And then the consolidation might have just made it easier for them to housekeep.
Yeah.
And hours of operation.
Yeah.
And the hours of operation. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So that's actually a good point though. So they've had approval for 3 events a year, up to 100 guests. And it seems as though from public testimony that there's been issues with that in terms of parking capacity. Let's see.
And if I can add a clarification in there with the 3 events, it says as attachment for as what is page 1 of attachment for existing conditions of approval, that it has an anticipated maximum of 750 daily visitors per event over 3 days. But you had mentioned 100 guests. Do you have a place where we can identify that, or is it up to 750?
And I think the condition of the 750, 3 events with 750 guests was the standard in our code.
Okay, that's what I was wondering
for a certain amount of time before the Senate Bill 1055 came in that modified that. So so they did have 3 events. There could be large events, and the events could have been it's 300 or excuse me, it is 3 events, 750 people over the weekend, 3-day weekend that they can hold the events. So it's not 750 people all at once. It's 750 people over the weekend.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so 6 events a year with a maximum attendance of 100 guests. That's more restrictive.
Well, I have one more question. And in the letter from neighboring property owners, there was an objection to the selling of and promoting of wines other than those that were from the property, grapes from the property. Is that something that is again complaint driven? And if you see that there are bottles of wine from, you know, Southern Italy, you're gonna, that's gonna be a black mark and a cause for some kind of a,
Yes, that's right, Commissioner Starrett. Normally, we permit wineries to sell wine produced on site and in the local area. And the local area is defined as Oregon, unless you're a border county, and then you can look at the neighboring county in Washington or California. So if we did get a complaint that said they're selling wines from outside the local area, we would open a code enforcement investigation. I don't know if we've done something similar in recent years.
We did have one that was selling Italian wine and we did a code enforcement and, we got a complaint on it and, told them, please stop. And, they eventually did. We worked with them though, and we would work with the food cart folks, there's going to be a time for the, appeal of any decision that is made. We would talk to them and try to work with them to not have it be an immediate, you're out of here.
so like the revenuers, you showed up with your hammers and smashed the bottles of wine that were not locally produced.
My question is why our wine is so good here? Why? That's how. Okay, so back to parking. We do not have in conditions that a traffic study is required. If we add something like that, what is the onus or the burdens on the applicant?
Yeah, the burden would be on the applicant, just so you know, the reasoning for why we didn't do a traffic study is it was an existing winery that was just asking for a few more events, really of limited amounts of folks for those events. And if it was an entirely new winery, yeah, we would have probably asked for a traffic study, especially on that road in that area. But we didn't because it was an existing one. They're asking for some extended hours, and really we didn't have any complaints about parking. We only got the complaints about parking after the appeal was filed. So we weren't aware that there were issues of parking until the hearing, and we even still had a condition in there about parking and have maintained that condition. But our view is it doesn't require a traffic study, but the board could have a very much different view on that and can require a traffic study.
So if you're going to hold a large event, we have a process for that through OLCC. What's the difference here? If we say, if this is going to become sort of the norm, or you're going to increase these every year, why not go through that kind of process where you do have to have on-site parking maintenance and you do have to have sort of special conditions with that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. For a conditional use winery, it's a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use. And these folks have 12 acres of grapes. And if they had 15 acres of grapes, they could actually apply for the 6 weekend events and do that as a just as a right. And so they're close. And so that's why we approve them for the 6 events. If they wanted to do an expansion of those, they'd have to go back through the process and kind of get this reapproved if they wanted to do a large number of events. But I will say we also kind of use the agritourism and the statute on the permitted use wineries as a guide. And there's a limit on the number of events you can have in each of those. The upper limit is 18 events, but as you get higher in the number of events, the threshold to prove that you can qualify for those becomes a lot steeper.
Mhm.
And so, I don't envision this one being able to qualify for more than the 6 that they're asking for, unless the state law changed. It doesn't mean that they can't ask for it and try to justify it, but I think they're getting close to what they could be allowed to do under what we've in the past approved.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question.
Go ahead. There's a lot of parts to this, so.
There are a lot of parts of this.
Lots to
So
unpack.
forgive me if I'm not seeing it. I only see proposed different hours of operation in the application. I don't see it in either the staff recommendation or the draft conditions of approval.
I don't see it either, so you're not alone. I was
And I
wondering.
see it in the docket explanation, but I don't see it in the proposed.
I would assume, I'd assume that just meant that you were approving the extended hours, that there's no conditions on
That
that.
there aren't any, that it would be just be like any other permitted use winery.
That's right. And we wanted to leave it open because it seemed like a big point of contention.
Mhm.
If you guys wanted us to rein that in, then we can add that as a condition of approval to whatever hours of operation the board feels is warranted or appropriate in this case.
So what are the conditions, or what are the hours, allowed hours of operation for a permitted use small winery? And are those different than what you're proposing here? Or not, you're not proposing anything, I guess.
Yeah, we don't have a standard,
Okay.
but the agritourism does allow events to go to 10 p.m. and they were asking to go to 10 p.m. So we use that as a guide. Because frankly, at
Mhm.
first I was thinking, it's getting a little late. Usually we go to 9 p.m. And in looking back, we haven't had that many people ask to go to 10 p.m. So I looked at the agritourism, thought, it says it in there as 10 p.m. We haven't had that come up as an issue. And my apologies. I thought the condition number 1 had some mention of what they requested. And I see that it's in the letter, but it's not specified as a condition. It should be as a condition. They did have a wanting to have, go to 9 p.m. in the winter and 10 p.m. in the summer, as I recall. And
was in their
I would
request,
say, I'd rather have it just be a standard rather than have it be broken out as to what day it is. So if you decide to go and add a condition that says 9 or 10 p.m., I just would like that to be, for the whole year. It's just easier to enforce.
Well, they're asking for different seasons. In other words, different times for spring, summer, winter hours.
So it's our understanding that we don't have very many wine tasting rooms open until 10 o'clock at night currently.
Currently, but that does, that is something that if you want to say that it should only go to a certain hour, that's totally fine. I'd like to, I would love to have that guidance.
Mhm.
Well,
So to clarify then, sorry, if I can, no, go for it.
I don't have clarifying questions, so go ahead.
Okay, so to clarify then, you're saying that permitted use, small wineries. So that I'm just saying the category, the cutoff category for a minimum of 15 acres, don't have in code any limitations on their hours of operation.
Correct.
Okay,
And
That's super helpful to know.
And I think, because they had differing hours called out for differing seasons, we had under condition number 1, and the winery operation shall substantially conform to the operations described in the application narrative submitted with the request.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
was our-
that does,
But
that does reference it, yeah.
But I would not mind at all specifying what that is, whatever the board decides as an add-on to that condition, that wineries shall not be open before this or after.
Well, I think Ken makes a good point about clarifying kind of our county philosophy around
Yeah.
wineries and wine tasting rooms. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of clarity there. And I really appreciated Bill Sweat's testimony, because I think to have that perspective, first of all, the wine community is very close, very tight knit. We say that this is complaint driven, but I mean, who wants to be ratting out their neighbors, right? That's really not a comfortable position to be in, especially when you're in the same industry. But Bill's perspective on how a wine tasting room sort of came to be, and that strict interpretation of vertical integration of property, farm property. Are we going beyond that? Right? How does a bed and breakfast, hotel, motel, whatever, or, a concert venue actually strengthen the vertical integration of a wine grape, going from a wine grape to processed, wine to drink and sell, the point of sale? So I think that perhaps that's a conversation that needs to happen as a board, to put some clarifying conditions on what we expect, because I don't think that the neighbors of these wineries and wine tasting rooms, when they purchased EFU land in rural Yamhill County, expected that they would end up living next to, a Moda center, right? That's not an expectation. Where do you draw the line of supporting private property rights and, definitely supporting agritourism and our wine industry, but when does tourism kind of trump the private property rights of others? So that's a conversation that I think we definitely need to have. I am not comfortable with the 10 p.m. I'm just sort of taking this piece by piece.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable
We
with
have
10
to take it piece by
p.m.
piece.
And this is just my experience. I've done my fair share of wine tasting. It's not something that I ever experience people doing at 9 and 10 p.m. It's just not, it's not a bar, right? So the issue of sort of moving our winery tourism focused into more of a nightlife type of thing, it just doesn't feel right to me. So I wouldn't be in favor of extending to 10. I think 9 p.m. is late enough. The food cart issue.
Can I ask one
Sure.
question about that? If we're going to take it piece by piece, I just want to
Mhm.
get some clarity then on that one. Because what I was hearing Director Friday talk about was, well, the hours of operation was really related. It was in conjunction with how you see the agritourism statute, right?
Yeah, a counterpoint though to the agritourism is that it's only certain weekends of the year. And
Yes,
so it's, it's,
that was going to be my point.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Didn't mean to
no, I
steal it.
know. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. It's nice when you can make it for me. And I'm
So
just wondering.
unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So originally Director Friday's comments were, well, we set this time because the agritourism statute allows for things to go to this time period. But the hours of operation that are, proposed in here are actually for all, for every day of the year, regardless of whether it's an event or not. And that made me wonder whether there would be interest from the board in saying for events, match the agritourism thing, right? Because some events go late. versus just your ordinary everyday operations of your wine tasting room.
For consistency.
Yeah.
Yes. How, well, okay. This is why it kind of goes with amplified music. And I mean, this is clearly there's an effort to create some type of musical attraction slash
Right.
concert slash nightlife type of experience. So
I think
you
we
know,
could
if
go
it's
on if you wanted,
event
yeah.
specific, I guess I'd be open to that. If it's, you know, per 6 events. I don't know if that's
That's what
even
I was wondering about, is
broken
whether
down in
that
here.
would make sense.
Do we break it down that in that granular type of?
We're setting policy for Director Freddie right now.
Okay, I didn't know if it was already in there and I missed
No,
it, but. Okay. So if it's an event, like a party or a reception and a specific one of those 6 events, I would be open to a little bit later hour, 10 PM or whatever it
Mhm.
is. But not as a standard practice.
Yeah, me too. Okay, and then your next thing was,
Um,
you know, food.
I know this is it's an impact to them, but I do agree with the food cart issue and the condition that it be removed. You know, we don't allow that elsewhere. In fact, the rules are pretty strict for wine tasting rooms on what they can serve. And that's for a reason. So,
And
I
would-
agree with that.
And I would add to that, I don't think that the 3 of us have had as many of it. I know that on a previous iteration of the Board of Commissioners, we had a number of conditional use permit wineries that came before us. And the planning staff, together with the Board of Commissioners, reduced the scale of what was allowed for them, kind of below the thresholds for permitted use wineries, in recognition of the fact that there was likely to be a bigger impact from a smaller facility. And so my feeling is that if you're smaller than the permitted use acreage, that we should be very careful to not grant you more permissions that even a small winery aren't allowed, right? Just
Right.
because you're coming to us through a conditional use permit process.
Agreed.
Hopefully
Yeah.
that made sense, but
Yeah,
it sounds
yeah,
like a little
it
bit of that
did.
made sense. Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in agreement on that. And then the acoustic allowance of acoustic music. I would agree with the planning directors.
Yeah, I'm glad that we
Mhm.
we now have called that out as a
Mhm.
specific thing, because you've done that, you added it to many, yeah. And I think that was in response to both community member and neighbor complaints and also to land use advocates.
Okay, let's see. In terms of the parking issue per event, okay, traffic management plan needs to be submitted. There was a lot of testimony about how the parking is insufficient per the square footage.
Mhm.
So what's the process for verifying that? Is that also complaint driven?
Yes.
Yes,
like-
And I think
it's
we have
also,
those complaints in the record.
Yeah.
So it would be accurate, right?
Okay. Okay, well. And just for, for the record, a traffic management plan includes per event. What exactly does that include?
Mhm.
Yeah, in the past, we've asked for a site plan that shows where the standard parking area is that's there permanently for the operation of the tasting room, and overflow parking area, a circulation pattern for pedestrians and vehicles. And for larger events that Public Works has sometimes asked for traffic direction, similar to the Sokol Blosser, where someone's out there managing the flow of traffic on the roadways. So those would all be things that we could work out per event with Public Works Department, the applicant, and our office. And we would not allow an event to proceed unless they had that event plan approved by both of our departments.
And then along those lines, questions regarding parking. What's the current square footage of the tasting room space?
2,100 or so. But then there's
20.
there's an outdoor space that apparently matches the square footage.
So with 2,100 square feet, that would be 21 parking spaces plus one for each employee per shift. I believe Counselor Albrecht's testimony, her final word, said that they have 14. I can pull it up, but I've been reading Bill Sweat's thing. So. It's not.
Yeah, and that they would then need to submit that showing that they have the additional parking in order to qualify for the uses that they're wanting to place on the property.
Right, so they would have to demonstrate that they have sufficient parking over and above what they say that they currently have in order to operate in accordance with the conditions of approval, right?
And I
You
found,
probably just said that in plain English.
and I found the comment from Counselor Albrecht
Oh, we
regarding
did.
this on page 3. The application did not increase the amount of square footage of the winery, tasting room, or otherwise. Furioso is required to provide 22 parking spaces for tasting room guests. As shown in Furioso's on-site parking plan attachment 3, the property offers permanent and temporary parking that far exceeds the county's requirements. So this is.
Oh, I see 22, yeah. I wonder where I saw 14 then.
So do we not count outdoor seating space?
We do not calculate outdoor seating space when we are calculating the parking requirements.
Hmm.
So what I think one thing that the chair is kind of wondering about, and I guess maybe I would then add a wonder to it, is we've heard a lot from neighborhood about parking issues there, and we've heard a tentative opinion from both our engineering project manager and from a traffic engineer about that intersection having challenges, right? I guess what I'm probably, it's a wonder for the board, but maybe with input, is how do we, is there a way to solve that in the conditions right now?
Well, and it sounds like the city of Dundee also has concerns.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that there's probably issues with parking, because if you have outdoor seating that matches the square footage of your indoor space, you know, you can have double the people. So maybe that's something that we need to
Right,
look
because
at.
that's
Right.
essentially the surge. That's the most they would have.
Well, the argument here is that the applicant can basically rely on the earlier parking calculations. And I'm wondering if it's sort of a workaround. So,
Right. Yeah, you're right, Commissioner, that is the argument. Not that I'm
Where,
terribly interested in making more policy right now on the fly with all of you, but I think that your comments combined with Chair Bershauer is, you know, making me wonder whether we do need to have something that acknowledges these outdoor seating spaces.
But would that be on, sort of on the heels of, or the back of this particular action? So I'm wondering, you know, how does that work?
Mhm.
Jody?
Let's see here, let me think. So if you want to place sort of uniform conditions across the boards on small wineries, is that what you're thinking? You'd have to change the zone or the zoning ordinance. So we'd have to do amendments and go through that legislative process.
Except that this is a condition of use.
That is outside of, oh,
Was that what you were meaning, or was I just hearing that?
so you'd probably put it in the conditional use zoning ordinance?
Well, if it's specific to parking requirements, we would just modify our parking standards.
There it is.
If that's the. if that-
That,
think that's
yeah,
the-
I mean, you can honestly place it wherever you'd like, whatever makes most sense to Ken is probably what I would go with. But yeah, if you want to make a uniform condition, we'd have to do it legislatively.
Mhm. But if we wanted to include it in conditions, it would just say.
You,
in
it would be a
conditions.
condition that you'd
Yeah.
approve, application by application.
Well, I think, you know, there's clearly concern over the bandwidth of parking. I think that, you know, based on the photos that were submitted, I don't have them in front of me. But based on the photos that were submitted, I think Furioso could do a lot to sort of better define their parking spaces so that perhaps there's not so much confusion or disagreement over how many spots they have. However, it does, you know, if there's such a inadequate amount of parking on the offset, and we can't seem to determine whether or not they meet our requirements, it makes me quite nervous to approve additional events with over 100 people.
Chair, I think that I think I'm leaning towards at least modifying. I can either modifying the condition of approval that includes modifying the condition number 4, which would be the events one, or modifying condition number 9, which is the one that's about permanent parking, in order to address that. What we say, you know, you shall have, right?
Well, I think that though that's already a condition and it's already presumably not being met.
So you're saying that there are existing conditions of approval that are not being met, and that not changing them, or if we didn't change them, they're still not going to be met, right? Or if we change them, they're still going to be met, not going to be met. So I'm wondering, like, how do we use the conditions of approval then to improve the parking situation? And really, to me, it's about the intersections and circulation safety for both people visiting and for people who are just trying to get past the place, right?
Absolutely. But
And-
I mean, we can't force compliance. So that's kind of my point. If there's already non-compliance, I'm not sure that upping the requirement is going to alleviate traffic.
Well, they say that they have 22 parking spaces. If we required a different ratio specifically for this facility, such that it required them to have 50% more, say like 33 permanently maintained spaces, that's a real discrete thing, that if neighbors say, hey, they're not meeting that, that's something that code enforcement can go and say, oh, you actually do need to have, 11 more places.
But the thing is it sort of arbitrary on our
Mhm.
part to be making that distinction on this? I'm wondering,
With a real financial impact.
yes.
Mhm.
To be
So
able to
it's
create
more a
those.
question of the enforcement part of it. I mean, that if a complaint, and apparently these complaints are documented. And have we responded to any of those?
No, we have not responded to any parking complaints at this point. If that's the question.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if we haven't responded, but we have gotten complaints.
We've only gotten testimony submitted. And in fact, after the last hearing, I said, if you've got complaints, we need to have them submitted
Okay.
as complaints.
I see.
So we've got testimony that has been submitted, but we don't have any sort of a official complaint.
So really, since the onus is on the complainant and we haven't received them prior to this, so that if there are, and then we can address those, it seems a little bit more fair than,
To let the complaint process
Yeah.
move it forward. Is that what you're
Right.
proposing?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I do know that Public Works will be doing something with the intersection that's closest and traffic circulation there. So that also gives me some assurance, right? That they're gonna be working on it
Right,
in a way that's very evidence-based.
right, okay.
Are they working in partnership with Dundee City? Might be good to bring them in. just-
Hopefully,
based on-
yes, yeah, I'll check in with Greg and Mark about that.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're kind of tackling the parking issue in various ways. But I would like to see if they're not compliant at this point, let's try getting into compliance and see if that helps.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other part of the conditions that we need to review?
Chair, I think that we've addressed them in ways that actually address people's concerns and comments and also still allows them to continue having no winery
Right,
on their vineyard.
Okay, so I will attempt to craft the motion.
There's a dinner in my head.
Well, maybe I shouldn't attempt. Maybe I'll write it out first and then we will. Unless Ken, if you want to suggest something and then I'll just say so moved.
safer option.
I think the only
I've-
changes I saw were the hours of operation.
Yeah, and I've written up something that just needs the times filled in that the board is comfortable with. So I'll kind of read the preliminary language and see if you guys want to modify it or and further define the hours. So potential condition of approval would be hours of operation for events shall begin no earlier than sometime AM and end no later than sometime PM. Hours of operation for the tasting room shall begin no earlier than such a time AM and shall close to the public no later than such a time PM. If those sound acceptable to the board, then I can just fill in the times for beginning operation and ending, and I'll reread the potential condition of approval.
Is 11 a.m. a standard time? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, so I will propose that the tasting room would be open consistently throughout the year from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that the 6 events that are proposed would be allowed between the hours of 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. Is that consistent? What we,
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I'm hesitant to allow it to go to 9 p.m.
To go
Oh.
events.
for the everyday
Oh.
tasting, but that's,
I thought that was standard. I
it
thought we
doesn't sound
were-
like there is a standard because, yeah,
Yeah, there is not really a standard. We just haven't had that many that have asked for it. And I'll say that, Water Oasis goes to 9:30 and, for their events. So we haven't really established any sort of a standard for wine tasting or hours of operation for wineries. I will say most of the ones that I've seen really only go till like 5 p.m. They don't
Right,
usually
5 to
go
6.
later
Yeah.
into the evening. Yeah.
Can I ask what they currently go until? Is it
I
5?
believe it's, I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no standard, then how do you pick your hours? How are people picking their hours?
We haven't had them ask for it to go this late before, so.
The current approval is until 7 PM for this winery. And in the past, we've put conditions when it's become an issue from neighbors. So we tailor the hours of operation if we get comments from surrounding property owners that say, they ask for their tasting room to be open till 8 PM, for instance. And we get comments and they ask for it to close by 6 PM. We then reach out to the applicant and say, hey, we received this concern. What can we do? Can we meet in the middle, or are you comfortable with the 6 PM? So when it becomes an issue, we work with the applicant and the surrounding property owner that has the issue and kind of tailor the condition based on that situation. But currently Furioso is approved for operation until 7 PM.
Until 7 PM.
A question, just,
Okay, thank you.
process wise, if we're making these determinations for time based on individual cases, it doesn't seem like there's a sort of a blanket approval or denial. And it almost seems kind of unfair if
Mhm.
somebody stays open till 7, somebody over here is open till 9 or 10. It's just, you're making those determinations based on a neighbor who's complained or maybe not. And I don't know if that's, fair.
Or you were gonna say something, and I can add.
No, I think you're exactly correct. And I will just say, we don't usually get them going past 7 o'clock. A lot of them are more like 5 o'clock that they want to have their tastings go to, and it just doesn't happen that often that we get anything past 7 o'clock.
And I was just gonna add that in my mind, at least, the difference is that conditional use permit wineries that don't meet the vineyard size threshold are a totally different beast in my view, because we really can and I think probably should, to reduce the impact of neighbors, tailor the conditions of approval to what that particular place is. And I can't remember the name of the road or the winery, but up on Eel Hills, adjacent to, or almost all the way to the Chambers. It's the one that's only has about 2 acres of vineyard with it. I think we approved in 2019. And, that one we made, sorry.
Brooks?
No, it's further up. It's like closer to what used to be the Chambers place.
Oh.
And that one, we made sure that everything about it was limited because it's a small parcel and the neighbors are all really close, including the farming neighbors. So to my mind, when people come to us wanting a conditional use permit winery, they're coming with the understanding that we can place conditions upon them that are different than permitted use wineries. And I recognize that this one, it sounds like it's close, but it's still, if it was close enough that, they'd apply. If they met the conditions, they'd apply for a permitted use winery. So with the hours that currently exist, it's probably in the August 14, 2009 one is where I see the hours of operation listed, the 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's the one. Okay. I would feel comfortable about having the open daily stay at that, because if we expand it, we know that there's going to be neighborhood impacts to other winery facilities, tasting rooms, road traffic. Like we just know that that's going to be more.
7 p.m.
To 7, yeah.
And OLCC doesn't dictate any of this?
If you wanted to go past 2 a.m., I think they would, but there's no OLCC limit that I've seen going to 9 or 10 p.m.
Okay. Well, we're learning. It's
Mhm.
really surprising that there's no limitations on hours, but I would be open to that. I was assuming that they already are open until 9 because some of the testimony talks about
Mhm.
being open late and how people, get off shifts from working in the wine industry and go and enjoy their wine and have food at the food cart. So I guess that was my impression from the testimony is they were already open late, but
Right.
um,
I realize it's a minor throwing into the conditions, and if you don't want to consider it, then don't worry about it. But is there, while we're thinking about how this is a conditional use permit winery, do we feel like there needs to be any specific language in the conditions about that this is only for promotion of wines in this area, or does it already exist? I'm just thinking about this Southern Italy illustration. Because technically, a conditional use permit winery, if we put it into there, I think if we put it into the conditions that they could be selling wines from outside of the area, or maybe not. Okay.
I would be in support. If that's a concern, I would be in support of putting that in as a, just as a clarification. that
I was
this is
just thinking
for
as a
Oregon
clarification.
wines.
Yeah.
but is that more appropriate for our overarching discussion about how we want to sort of govern wine tasting rooms? And
I think permitted use wineries, it says it, right, in statute.
that's my
Yeah.
impression is you
Mhm.
have to actually, it's a part of vertical integration. You have to grow the grapes and then process them and then sell them.
But
Right.
just so there's no confusion, it's a conditional use winery
Yeah.
and
Okay.
the intent was not to do anything but promote Oregon wine.
Yeah. Do you feel comfortable with that? I just want
Well,
to,
I do, but I also feel that it kind of reeks of the big hand of government revenuers type of a feel where we're nitpicking now. And I understand the intentional, the intent behind allowing tasting rooms and agritourism was to promote what was grown locally. I feel like when you put something in there, I understand it. I won't fight against it,
Mhm.
but I feel it's awfully nitpicky.
I recognize that. I'm just realizing that with recognizing, identifying this as a conditional use permit winery, that with the number of complaints that have come up, at least in the record here, and that have referenced previous concerns, and that having something that says, this is actually why we're allowing you to do this commercial activity in conjunction with farm use.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
I would go along with that
Okay.
and make it.
I can drag you if you
can
need,
drag
like a
me
little bit of
kicking and
dragging.
screaming.
Okay. No, not screaming.
It does feel like we're kind of nitpicking and picking on Furioso though. So I acknowledge that sentiment.
Mhm.
This is our job, however, to create the boundaries for how these are supposed to operate.
Yeah,
Um,
this is all, I mean, to me, this is all about the neighbor impacts on
Mhm.
other farms, right?
Okay, so what would you propose in terms of hours? Because I did not interpret our discussion
Oh.
correctly.
Yes, to maintain the existing hours, which are from August of 2009, which is 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. to maintain
Okay.
the same hours.
So even for the 6 events,
No, or you were looking at me, but I was gonna say that my view of the 6 events is that it's in essentially mimicking the agritourism allowance that's in statute. So events being their own separate hours of operation.
but no limit on the hour, the
No.
evening hour.
10 PM for the
Yeah,
events.
yeah, 10 p.m.
That
for the
is,
events,
okay,
yeah.
okay. Okay,
And obviously, this isn't something, I mean, when we say you can only operate between this time and this time, we're not saying you have to operate for that length of time
Right.
either, right?
okay, so Lance, do you want to read that now in its entirety and then we can say so moved?
Yeah, thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Chair Burschauer. I'll read the entire conditions and I'll work in the two new conditions. So the new recommended conditions of approval would be condition number 1. The development shall substantially conform to the site plan submitted in docket SDR-17-16, site plan titled Layout Plan and Paving Plan. And the winery operations shall substantially conform to those operations described in the application narrative submitted with this application, docket C-11-22/SCR-22-22. Condition number 2, the applicant shall obtain all permits required by the Department of Environmental Quality, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. Condition number 3, all outside storage shall be screened from neighboring parcels. Condition number 4, the subject parcel shall host no more than 6 events per year. An individual event shall not exceed 100 persons or vehicles. A traffic management plan shall be submitted for approval to the Planning Department and the Public Works Department prior to hosting an event. Condition number 5, all building permits necessary for construction or expansion of the winery or tasting room or conversion of an existing building for use as a winery or tasting room shall be obtained from the Yamhill County Building Department. Condition number 6, prior to initiation of the wine production or wine tasting operation, unless already recorded, the landowner shall sign an affidavit acknowledging the following declaratory statement and recorded in the deed and mortgage records for Yamhill County. Quote, the subject property is located in an area designated by Yamhill County for agricultural uses. It is the county policy to protect agricultural operations from conflicting land uses in such designated areas. Accepted agricultural practices in this area may create inconveniences for the owners or occupants of the property. However, Yamhill County does not consider it the agricultural operator's responsibility to modify accepted practices to accommodate the owner or occupants of the property, with the exception of such operators' violation of state law. Condition number 7, pursuant to section 1006.07 sub A of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance, the use shall be allowed a single sign not to exceed 24 square feet in area subject to permit approval. Condition number 8, the winery shall be limited to a production of no more than 50,000 gallons per year. Condition number 9, parking shall be established and permanently maintained as long as the winery or tasting room is operating so that there is a minimum of 1 parking space per 100 square feet of tasting room space, plus 1 parking space for each employee on maximum working shift pursuant to section 1007 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Parking shall not be permitted on the access easement or along the Northeast Warden Hill Road, Northeast Warren Road, and Northeast Fairview Drive right-of-way. Condition number 10, the use of outdoor amplified music or sound shall not be permitted. Condition number 11, any lighting used for illumination shall be placed, shielded, or deflected so as not to shine onto adjacent dwellings or create excessive glare on adjacent roadways. Condition number 12, the on-premise food cart shall be removed from the subject parcel. Food carts and on-premise restaurants shall be prohibited until such time as the subject parcel or tract qualifies as a, quote, large winery as defined by ORS 215.453 or other suitable land use approval is obtained. Condition number 13, hours of operation for events shall begin no earlier than 11 a.m. and end no later than 10 p.m. Hours of operation for the tasting room shall begin no earlier than 10 a.m. and shall close to the public no later than 7 p.m. Condition number 14, the tasting room shall only serve wine produced on site and wines produced in Oregon. Condition number 15, the construction of any additional structures or modifications to the footprint of existing structures used in conjunction with the winery or tasting room shall require the submission and approval of a site design review application. Condition number 16, modification of any of the above conditions requires approval under section 1202.05 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Violation of any of the above conditions may result in revocation of the conditional use permit with the process detailed in section 1202.07 and 1202.08 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance, and that concludes the recommended conditions of approval.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Commissioners, I will move approval of the 16 conditions that were just outlined by Lance.
No further discussion from you, Chair.
Is there further discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes.
And
Okay.
thanks to neighbors and to the applicant and to
Yes.
staff on this one.
And all
Thank
of the
you.
public testimony and
Thank you.
time it took. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Do we want to
5 minutes.
take 5 minutes and then we'll move into the next one? Okay, we will re-adjourn at 11:46. Thanks.
Wouldn't it be accurate? Never amend the RC.
Okay, we are coming back into our formal agenda for November 3rd. I'm actually going to take us back into the public hearing, number 1, because we do have to schedule findings. So thoughts on that?
We have time for December 1, because that's our.
Is that the next meeting?
But we have
Just-
one next week, and then we have 2 weeks without commissioner meetings.
Yes, December 1st. Plenty of time.
Are we still okay with timelines?
Yes, we should be okay with timelines to.
Think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will schedule those for December 1st. Thank you. I didn't remember. Can't remember. I always miss them.
You had the form of remembering.
Okay. Okay, so that brings us to public hearing number 2, which is docket number SU-02-22. Excuse me. A similar use interpretation of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance YCZO to add the following use. Operations conducted for the exploration of aggregate resources, subject to the requirements in section 404.10 to the list of permitted uses in the RC Recreation Commercial Zoning District. This request was also subject to site design review and the mineral resources exploration permit standards provided in section 404.10 of the YCZO. The applicant is Turner Rock Products LLC. The appellant is Kenneth Mills, and this has been continued from September 29th of 2022, and we will reopen at the point of staff report. Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Chair Burschauer. The staff report is as follows. The subject parcel is split zoned with a 32.5 acre portion of the property located in the Recreation Commercial RC zone and approximately 57.5 acres in the Forestry zone, the F80 zone, and approximately 4 acres of the southwest corner of the property in the exclusive farm use EF80 zone. The subject parcel is located along the eastern slopes of Mount Richmond with a maximum elevation of approximately 1,200 feet in the northeast corner of the property that slopes steeply to the east to a minimum elevation of approximately 700 feet, which is along the eastern property line, which also runs along the Mount Richmond Road right-of-way. The subject property is unimproved and has been used historically for commercial timber production. Adjacent properties to the north and west are located in the F80 zone, the forestry zone, and the majority of the land zoned for forestry use in this area appears to be used for commercial timber production with the occasional home site as well. Adjacent properties to the east and southwest are located in the EF80 exclusive farm use zone, and farm uses in the area include livestock pasturage and hay fields. There are homes located on 3 adjacent lots to the south, and those are tax lots 2406-00800, 2406-00900, and 2406-00901. A lot to the southeast also has a home site, and that is tax lot 2406-01000, and the lot kitty corner to the northwest of the subject property also has a home site, and that is tax lot 2501-00100. The application is for a similar use interpretation to add operations conducted for the exploration of aggregate resources subject to the requirements in subsection 404.10 to the list of permitted uses in the recreation commercial zoning district. If the similar use request is approved, then any recreation commercial zone property in the county may submit a site design review request for aggregate exploration activities. As the applicant's request relates to this property, the subject parcel being split zoned, and the applicant will be conducting aggregate explorations in the area of the property located in the forestry zone, which is permitted in that zone. Approval of this similar use request will allow the property owner to conduct a comprehensive exploratory assessment of this property to determine whether there are aggregate resources of sufficient quantity and quality to justify further land use actions in order to extract these resources. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you, Lance. Okay, so I do want to acknowledge that we received some additional public testimony. And Mrs. Jernstead did file a, notice to, have oral testimony, but we did receive your written testimony. I do remember reading that from. Okay, okay. So we've seen that, both sets.
I have.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna acknowledge that. And then the recent one that came in from Mr. Brawand. Via email. Okay, so I have quite a few questions on this one. Can you recap for us what percentage of this property, or at least the land that is being proposed for exploration is zoned F80 versus RC?
Yeah, so the recreation commercial zoned area of the property is approximately 32.5 acres. And approximately 57.5 acres of the property is in the forestry zone. And then there's a small 4-acre portion that's in the southwest corner of the property that is EF80.
Chair, I
Okay.
just wanted to clarify. Oh, go for it. You still have some questions.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted
Did I
to
miss something?
clarify, are we haven't taken testimony in support or opposition, but we could just take that all at once, right? We don't, because it's a legislative, we don't need to go in any particular order.
No, it's quite.
Oh, it is quasi judicial. Okay.
Hang on.
Okay, great.
Did I
I just want to make sure we get people's testimony.
misread the
No, you didn't misread. We had. previously
staff
opened this
report?
up,
Okay,
And
Mhm.
there was a question about notice to other RC zones throughout the county.
Yes.
So we did notice other RC zones throughout the county.
Mhm.
And so we had already previously opened it up with the razor away that order now at the applicants.
Okay, cool.
So you're doing great.
Okay, great.
okay. But I missed. Okay, I was thinking in my mind, because I have read the testimony, but maybe we have not heard it yet.
We just haven't taken any
Okay.
in person.
Gotcha, not recommendation. Okay. It's still foggy. Okay, okay, so
I have
now,
to check that because I was like, should we do this? It's nice having the land use attorney.
okay, so we are at applicant's case. Okay. So, is there someone to present the applicant's case? Come on up. Sorry about that. I was thinking, where did we leave off this last time? I know I read the testimony. Yeah.
But I know that we've
Welcome.
all sit here.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
all sat for so long. But
If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Is this on? All right.
yeah.
My name is Mark Turner. Did you want my address as well?
Yes.
Okay,
Please, thank you.
my address is 23265 Northwest Fisher Road, Buxton, Oregon, 97109.
Great.
All right.
Go ahead.
In 1987, my sister Julie, my brother Greg, and I purchased our property on Mount Richmond. Although we had a vague idea that there had been some sort of a rock pit on the property, our reasoning for the purchase was to manage the timber ground. The previous owners had changed part of the property zoning from forest district to recreational commercial. This was to facilitate a project to create a motorcycle hill climb. Unfortunately, after a motorcycle rider was killed on the property, liability issues ended that endeavor, and the property has not been used for any recreational commercial activities since. In a perfect world, at that point, the property should have been returned to its original forest district zoning. However, it wasn't, and to this day, it is zoned recreational commercial district. We later learned that during the 1970s, the Federal Bureau of Reclamation identified and supervised the development of a high-quality aggregate source on the Mount Richmond property for the construction of Scoggins Dam. The next time you visit Hag Lake and drive across Scoggins Dam, notice the rock that is covering the western face of the dam. You will now know that material came from our Mount Richmond property. Once the Scoggins project was completed, the rock pit was put to bed and has slowly been overtaken by vegetation. Based on this information, we decided that we wanted to do some exploratory drilling to determine the quantity, quality, and accessibility of the rock at our Mount Richmond property. We've applied for an exploration permit with the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, or DOGAMI, the agency that regulates mining in Oregon. It's come to our attention that there is a rumor going around that the pit was shut down because it was quote unquote hurting the environment. So I personally contacted DOGAMI and they told me that there are no records of any infractions stemming from the property. We're not some big corporation that doesn't care about the environment or the people around us. We're just regular people and we want to be good neighbors. Our parents instilled in us the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion for others. It's our desire to be honest and straightforward in our endeavors and to follow the proper guidelines and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for the bumps. My name is Eric Staley. I'm a geologist with NV5. The address is 9450 Southwest Commerce Circle in Wilsonville, 97070. I'm a mining and engineering geologist. I have more than 22 years experience now doing this kind of work. And the Turners hired our company to help them assess the geologic characteristics of the property. Like they said, there historically was a mine site on the property. We wanted to evaluate the inherent geology before the Turners were to take any other steps toward pursuing a potential mineral operation. Part of that is to understand the subsurface, not just of the area readily available for mining, but of the surrounding area. And so my approach would usually be to take a look at the entire property and explore it so that you can understand not just the locations where you've drilled, but the interpreted geologic quality and structure in between borings and in the surrounding vicinity. So one of the reasons we wanted to expand the exploration plan onto the RC zone was because it's inherently part of the property and it gives us a better understanding of the overall deposit if it is located there. To not use the RC zone for our exploration activities would limit our ability to understand the inherent geology and hence the scientific endeavor that we're trying to achieve here. The methods that we're going to propose to use is to use some fairly standard exploratory methods. We have air track drilling, which is actually, so we handed out a packet of 4 pictures. The third page shows an air track drill rig that was actually just used out in Washington a couple months ago. You can see that there's a single operator. It's about the size of an average excavator. It uses air to clear drill cuttings out of the hole as the hole is made. The lower right picture that you can see is with a geologist's foot for scale, how big the drill hole is. That hole will then be backfilled with sodium bentonite, which is a clay mineral that when it gets wet, it swells and seals off the hole. So as part of our operations, we will explore, we will understand the rock characteristics, and then we will backfill the holes so that they're not left open. The second or the last page that you see is for a mud rotary rock coring rig. We're going to also propose to do a limited number of borings with that. And instead of using the air track rig, which is basically like a glorified jackhammer, the rock coring will actually recover cylinders of rock core from the ground, hopefully continuously, so that we can see a full picture of what the underlying soil and rock strata are. So those are the kinds of rigs that we would use for evaluating an aggregate deposit. And it was a little surprising to us to find out that the RC zone did not allow that, even though it is allowed in the F80 and the EF80 zoned properties. RC zone does allow exploration of gas, oil, and geothermal. And so the first two picture collages that we provided for you show the pretty standard layout for an oil or gas exploration and for a geothermal exploration operation, where you can see that the rigs are substantially taller than what we're going to be bringing through on the site, and also involve quite a disturbance, a build pad, a lot of truck traffic, a lot of fluids and other things and fluid management that we won't have to interact with. It's a much larger operation that's already allowed in the RC zone compared to what we're proposing for just the mineral exploration on this property. In terms of reclamation, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to permit the activity through the department or through Dogami. We already have an exploration permit in place, and there'll be a mutual condition for either permission that everything be in place before we're allowed to do our operations. That operation will include a bond so that there's some financial security behind us being able to reclaim any of the disturbance associated with the drilling. And yeah, it's going to meet Dogami standards where we backfill and we make sure that we don't leave significant trace behind for the explorations. One point I want to make and emphasize is that at this stage, we are just trying to evaluate the inherent characteristics of the site. We're not proposing a mine at this time. So I know that there's been quite a bit of testimony talking about the potential adverse effects of mining. We're not there yet. And until we know what is on the site, we really don't want to entertain what kind of mine we're into.
Great, thank you.
I have a few questions, but it looks like
I have
Commissioner Sterry.
a, go ahead if you want.
Okay,
I have one too. Should I go first?
yes, yeah, I'll jump into it then.
Okay.
I happen to be somewhat familiar with this project here, and this is not like your typical projects. You probably know, right, that this is a deep exploration project that isn't typical. So I just wanted to note that.
What are you looking at?
Oh, sorry, the number one at Ilford with the Department of Energy. But I did want to ask, since at least between the two of you probably know the answer to this, is why didn't you just submit a request to change the zone?
I think because of rezone tends to be a more complex effort than just allowing us to be able to explore the property first. We're trying to do things sequentially in order of complexity and time and cost.
But you're coming before us with this request.
Right. Well, I think a rezone would have to actually achieve quite a bit more, wouldn't it? In terms of what the code criteria we would need to address, that we would hit, various environmental, economic, and other sorts of consideration standards, whereas this is literally just the ability to be able to drill on the site.
It's more than that. It's the ability to drill on all RC zones is kind of my point, but thank you for that answer. The other question I have for you then is, since I don't see the zones delineated in the packet, and maybe it's in your further testimony, where is the historic quarry site relative to the RC zone and the F80 zone?
The historic quarry is on the north side of the property. So I believe that would be within the F80 zone.
Yeah. Okay. So like if I don't know if you can see it, but it's somewhere up here, or I mean it's a rectangle. So
yeah, it's a little bit of a glare on your screen, but I believe it's in the northeast corner, more or less. Yes, about there. right
Okay,
about
it
there.
looked like there was disturbance on the photo, so.
Mhm, mhm.
Cool. So that's primarily in the F80, but in your geologic knowledge, you're like, I need to see the whole property, right? Not just
Correct.
what's at the old site.
Correct, because
Okay.
it's not just about whether there's hard rock underneath the ground, right? But what is the geologic structure that leads toward that area? So that's why we do a more expansive view of the explorations.
Okay, I think that's it for my questions for you. I have some questions for staff, but I'm gonna wait because we have, I want to circle it, but I don't want to circle.
Okay,
It's-
Commissioner Stark, go ahead, because this was my question.
Well, my question is more for staff, although you might know the answer to this is, so if this is really what we're looking at is the exploration at this point, would there need to be additional procedures at the county level? I know perhaps Dagami might need, do they need anything else for you to proceed with an actual project?
If you mean a mining project, most definitely. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
we're
you're
nowhere,
just, no, you're just going through for the exploration phase of this, and then we would need to do an additional process.
That's when there would be a zone change likely would be required. So yeah, this is only exploration. And exploration is allowed in the adjacent zones and similar types of exploration is allowed in the RC zone. And so really the similar use is kind of custom made for this sort of issue so that you don't have to do a whole plan amendment and zone change just to do exploration, that you can apply and show that it's similar to something that's already allowed in the zone, and it is. And so it's only exploration, though. It does not allow mining. They have to go through a fairly extensive process to do something like that.
So we're getting some testimony from people who have concerns and questions about the proposal to approve the creation of a quarry operation. And they're talking about explosives and damage to wells and things like that. So that's way down the line. So these concerns are not relevant to the exploration phase of this.
that's correct.
Okay.
We are on a fact-finding mission effectively right now.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more, Chair.
And just, this might sound kind of silly, but I'm assuming that your purpose is to fact find over the entire property, correct? So you're not really focused on one part of it. This is a property-wide effort. Okay. Okay. Any further questions? No? Okay.
And then for the applicants.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, is there testimony in support of the application? If you're online, just raise your hand. Okay, seeing and hearing none, we will move on to the appellant's case. I'm assuming there's no organized, well, Mr. Since I've,
The Mills have graciously allowed me to take the first speaking place.
Okay.
My 93-year-old mother's in the ER at Willamette Hospital, or at here in the McMinnville Hospital, and I'm anxious to rejoin her.
okay. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
And I apologize for the misunderstanding earlier. You were looking at me like, what's she doing?
Was she? I couldn't see
She
you.
totally skipped over
Good
the
that
stuff.
we weren't making eye contact.
Well, I'm trying to stay close to the door because the x-rays are negative, but she's on an IV. And so my name's Catherine Jernstead. I'm here on behalf of Friends of Yamhill County. Our mailing address is P.O. Box 1083, McMinnville, Oregon. I personally reside on Mineral Springs Road outside Carlton. Well, our interest in this has a lot to do with the possible implications down the road of similar use determinations. I understand that this is a number of fairly significant steps between here and actual aggregate mining. But there's been a great deal of confusion among potentially impacted property owners based on notifications and similar use. What does that mean? And so I've missed part of your earlier discussion, but I think it illustrates how incremental decisions end up being compounded, and the county's limited enforcement resources are sometimes overstretched. The other really interesting part of this, I believe Miss David Browen, or whatever his name is, I had a long conversation with him late last night about how he's West Side Excavating. He currently also has property in Prineville and is right next door to a quarry there. He's spread a lot of gravel in his years, but he's concerned about the unique characteristics of this site. It is in the Department of Fish and Wildlife's wildlife protected zone. There are potential issues with water, and the overall concern is, yes, they're going to explore with the expectation or hope that it's going to result in a quarry, and that the process has the potential of not including very close-in stakeholders with very strong interests in this. Peter Hayes, I believe, has submitted testimony, and he's talked about how gravel's an essential component. He's Mount Richmond Forestry. And so that they understand that gravel is a valuable resource, but they are concerned about the unique elements of this habitat. And I don't know that I can answer it. Frankly, I'm a little unfocused, but the concern for many of these neighbors is that this particular thing will pick up momentum past the point where they can slow it down and have a serious discussion of wildlife, water impacts. Mr. Broward had said that he's driven a lot of equipment up there. He owns an adjacent parcel, and the road is just kind of an old, he said cow path. I think it might have been an elk trail that was eventually graveled over. It's not bedded. As this moves forward, there is a potential of road issues for access, perhaps not in exploration, but that there are potential consequences and costs for roads in the area as well. Again, I highlighted them on the wildlife map. They're right there in the sensitive winter range. Also, the reports of water and seepage, and I don't know if it's an appropriate location for a wetlands delineation, usually not that far up the hill. But again, there are jurisdictions with interests in some of the environmental issues, in addition to Degami's commitment to aggregate resource development. So I don't know that I have so much of a specific ask. I did inquire if there was a map of where all the other RC zones in the county are. Are we talking about more of these areas where they pursued recreational zoning based on some unique qualities of the setting? And again, I understand that there's some vulnerability to the argument based on the fact that gas and geothermal are exploration or permitted. But I'm very worried about that transition from exploration to utilization, and that with aggregate mining, it's just going to be so much more impactful than you would probably expect from the other two methods. Again, I'm open to questions.
Commissioners, questions for Catherine?
Thank you, Catherine, and I hope your mom's well. A couple of things, and this might be more for staff, but when some folks who've submitted testimony have brought up issues about roads, noise, and water, which is what we hear during everything from wineries to bed and breakfast to anything. So those particular elements were brought up as concern. Would the road issue be addressed? Because I know that Mr. Brawand has is concerned about the roads. Now, if that is something that will be addressed in the next phase, should there be exploration, should there be utilization? I just want to make sure we have an answer to that today.
Yes, if there's utilization, if they need to rezone this to mineral resource, it needs to be put on our comprehensive plan as a mineral resource. And there's a very extensive amount of studies that need to be done, and roads are in and amongst that. So yes, and again, this is only exploration. It does not approve or even necessarily lead to approval of resource use, but it lets them know, what's there, what, is this something that they want to explore later on to as doing a zone change. But yeah, there's a lot of questions that would need to be answered in order for them to rezone the property and to utilize the resource if it's even there.
Thank you. And another thing while we're on Mr. Browan's letter is he said, I was never notified of this and apparently lives just around the corner. I know we had some concerns about making sure that folks were notified, and I want to make sure we're not going there ever again, is not letting people know who need to know about something significant.
I would say there's honest differences of opinion regarding who needs to know. If they notified other RC zone landowners, that would not necessarily reach adjacent properties, but there's a pretty strict statutory requirement that I believe they're trying to comply with. So I'm not going to assert failure on their part, but just that the process of a similar use determination without so much extra information has created confusion.
Okay.
And we did send out notice to neighboring property owners and to all neighboring property owners of the RC zone. And for whatever it's worth, in the if there was an application made to do mineral extraction here, the state law only requires us to go out 750 feet, but we're required to look out 1,500 feet from the site. And so we just normally send out a notice 1,500 feet from the site because we're looking at any conflicts for that anyway. So, but for this application, if you're outside of the notice area, we also posted in the newspaper, and we frankly kind of depend on neighbors being able to talk to neighbors to let them know that they got something in the mail, it's going on. And frankly, this letter is a good indication that that sort of thing works, because if you're down the road a little bit and, they got the letter and they're here submitting testimony and they want to have a follow-up call. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine.
But Ken, after September 29th, we notified all RC landowners as well, no matter where they are. So what does that look like? What do we say to them? That this is coming forward as a potential permitted use?
Yeah, so the language would be similar to what we sent to some of the partner agencies that we also notified. A similar use interpretation of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance to add the following use to the recreation commercial zone, which would be operations conducted for the exploration of aggregate resources subject to the requirements in section 404.10 to the list of permitted uses in the RC Recreation Commercial Zoning District. This request was also subject to site design review and the mineral resource exploration permit standards provided in sections 404.10 of the YCZO. This request is more specifically related to tax lot 2406-00700. And please see attached maps, which were included with that notice for additional information regarding the potential site for the proposed aggregate exploration activities proposed by the applicant. This similar use request will affect all recreation commercial zoned properties in Yamhill County, and more specifically, a property located adjacent to Northwest Mount Richmond Road, Gaston, directly west of the property located at 28600 Northwest Mount Richmond Road, and north of the property located at 28399 Northwest Mount Richmond Road.
Okay. So to follow up on one of Ms. Jernsted's concerns about a map for RC properties, is that something that we have?
Yes, we have it on our GIS. You just turn the RC layer on and can see where the RC zones are throughout the county. Usually, I will say this RC zone is one of the furthest out, if you will. Most of them are things like golf courses, Flying M Ranch. So it's kind of hard to characterize them generally, but in the county, there's not that many of them, and usually they're already in use. So this is one that is rare in that standpoint, that it's not already in use for some sort of recreational use.
Okay. Okay, any further questions for Catherine while we have her here?
I don't have more questions for Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care of your mom.
Thank you.
Yeah. I
Yes.
appreciate it.
And again, I'm going to apologize to the other people that I told I'd be here. I understand they've got some very heartfelt concerns, and within the scheme of things, I know that there's going to be some frustration. But I haven't visited it myself, but it sounds like a truly remarkable natural resource as it currently sits. So,
Thank you. Okay, is there any other testimony in opposition to the application? And if we could have you fill out one of these, we typically do these for public comment. Are they back there? Oh, you did? Okay. Are you Mr. Mills? Oh, okay. Come on, you can come forward. Sorry about that.
Because the first letter you guys sent out said, about a quarry going in, and then we get another letter. And I don't know, there's two different kind of maps on there that had it all marked out. And I know there's some marks on there that are like directly behind my house, like pretty close. So it was a little concerning about that.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure that, if it screws up my well or, whatever, it doesn't impact me financially. I mean, other than that.
Right.
it's,
Okay, and I just want to clarify in our packet, Mr. Mills submitted this to 3-page testimony. Is that, because it doesn't really say who it's from, it just says an attachment for the Mills appeal.
That's probably it.
Does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah.
Where it talks about, your family has owned the property since 1963. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And are you across Mount Richmond Road or
No, I'm directly like right behind,
right behind it? Okay.
or right in front of, I guess, or however.
Yeah.
Whatever, I'm on the south side.
On the south side. Yes, I thought. Okay.
So like right here on Mount Richmond?
No,
Road?
that's the other neighbors. I'm kind of right in the middle.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's easier to see on.
Sorry, our maps are not the greatest.
I know some of the, where they had the
Thank you.
spot marks where they're gonna drill is like pretty close. Number 12, actually.
So if I'm looking at the right testimony, I apologize, I'm trying to catch up on my highlighted areas here, but you said that a portion of Mount Richmond Road along the property line was destroyed from erosion back in the early 80s and had to be completely reworked by the county.
That's probably right where it's, yeah,
Um,
their property's right on the road there.
Do we have any confirmation or comments from Public Works about kind of the history or challenges of this road in this area? I didn't see any.
We, Madam Chair, I sent a referral request to Public Works and we didn't receive a response regarding this project at all.
Okay. And then it also says in January of 2021, DOGME released a notice concerning a landslide warning in Yamhill County for this area. Does that sound familiar? Come on up if you.
For the interests of the record, to make sure we got recorded, we've got a lot of
Yep.
conversations and questions and,
Yeah.
information. I just want to make sure we're able to capture it in the record.
Yeah,
right
so
now.
that's okay. You can hold on to it for now, but if you could state your name and address for the record, you'll need the
My
microphone.
name is Julie Mills
Thank you.
and I live at 27875 Northwest Mount Richmond Road, directly behind, south of him.
Okay, great.
I can see the property line from my house.
Okay. Did you have a statement that you wanted to make or
I just
comments?
want to agree with his testimony that he submitted the, what?
Well, you did some of it too.
Well, right, I mean, my biggest concern that I have is a lot to do with water. My property has a creek that runs from the Turner property down through his property and is pretty much a wetland intermittently throughout the year. It is very, it's Han Creek, I believe is the name of the creek. And I'm concerned of the impact that it's gonna have on that, really. As well as my well water, because it happened before, so.
Okay,
And then one of your, I have a question for you. Oh,
sure,
wait,
go ahead.
you. One of your neighbors has a conservation easement too, I think, right? Like for some endangered species. Let-
Mike and Pam probably Dewar
Yeah.
with the deer.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I
That
just,
came through yesterday.
oh, okay.
Or there was public testimony about that.
Okay.
That they created in conservation easement.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then go for it.
Mr. Sarah.
Just a question, and thank you very much. You said this happened before.
Yeah, I did. My parents lived there since 1963. Well,
77.
74, so, and, my father, said that when, and apologize, I don't know for sure, because my father passed away. That it was either when, they were blasting with the quarry, or when the timber was cut.
Pretty sure it was
in-
when they were blasting.
Yes, I think so too. I do remember sulfur smells and whatnot with the water when the timber was cut, but that they had to re-drill our well because it affected our water. And so they had to drill deeper. Wilcox Drilling came up and re-drilled our well because of it affected our well water and we didn't have any.
Okay, thank you.
But just to be clear, the quarry was on the F80 zone
Yes.
that permits the use of, that permits that, correct?
I think the
Activity.
quarry was there before the zone change.
Was it? Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Oh,
probably.
before the zoning existed, yeah.
yeah,
Right.
gotcha.
They did have a public hearing though, because mom and dad came to that.
Oh.
And mom got up and spoke, just like we are now, about the proposed quarry, and it was denied of whatever they denied them of, I don't know, and mom
So
can't
they did
remember.
take some rock out of it.
They did, yeah.
Okay.
If I may, I just want to put a reminder, I know it's really difficult in this type of setting. You're
Yes.
probably not used to it, but I just want to encourage and also, I'm getting reports that you're difficult to hear
Me?
in the recording, so if you
Sorry,
could.
I just work 12 hours a night.
I
shift,
know,
so my
I'm
voice is
sorry.
gone.
And Commissioner, I'm getting the same reports.
Yeah, I'll
too.
put it in front of me. Okay, I have a question. So you mentioned in your testimony the setback from exploratory drilling, essentially. So question for Ken and for Lance is, how do you work with Dogami on an exploration plan if they're the ones who authorize the exploration plan, but it doesn't take into account neighbors? And this is, I apologize, this is not actually similar use determination, but it informs it for me.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, the GAMI is the one that regulates the drilling on the site. And I do think that there is confusion that this is somehow going to be mining, and it's not mining, it's drilling, and it's not explosion, not any explosives. It's just drilling on the site. Anything that relates to mining or use of explosives to do mining would need a lot more evaluation, and would need a plan amendment and zone change, and would take months to go through the hearing process to do, and neighbors in the area would get notified of it. All they're looking to do is to drill and do some studies on what is there, what rock is there. And rock is aggregate is a goal 5 resource. It's something that is a non-renewable resource. It's something that we actually encourage to find it and have it be identified and protected from conflicting uses. And so, you know, it's, you know, I can understand the concern of a neighbor saying, hey, I don't want to have this here. But right now, all they're doing is drilling, and drilling is allowed in both of these zones for different uses. And the applicant has said, you know, they're trying to be honest, and I very much appreciate that and take them at their word. I mean, if there was a drill rig out there and they said it was for gas exploration rather than for aggregate, I'm not sure how our staff would know whether it was or wasn't. And if they wanted to drill a number of wells on the property, there's nothing that prohibits them from putting multiple wells on this property. And so it's the similar use in the zoning ordinance is it's put there because we couldn't in these non-resource zones list every use that might eventually come up. I mean, some of these codes were written in the 70s. A lot of them were written in the early 80s. And so there's a list of uses that are there, but there's also this catch-all in certain zones that say, you know, if it's similar to something that is listed, then you can go through a process and permit that and allow that. And once it gets allowed, then it's allowed in all the zones, in all of that one zone that the similar use was approved under. In this case, I mean, it's this is, you know, perfectly in line with the aggregate being a similar use to other resource exploration that involves drilling. And so that's the decision that was made. It does not approve mining. It does not approve resource use. All it does is approve exploration of that resource. And there would need to be quite a bit in order to have this property used as aggregate. And they're trying to decide do they want to do that or do they not? And they're just trying to get information right now, so.
Well, that was
Thank you, Ken.
helpful,
Yeah.
Ken. Just to, as a follow-up, you asked, I didn't realize it was rhetorical, but how would we know? And of course, any plan is filed with Dogami, so any neighbor could go to Dogami and ask for the plan, right?
Correct, but you could have wells. I mean, the drill rig that they're showing here looks very similar to a well drilling rig. And, you do have to submit, the well report to the Water Resources Department, but that doesn't go through our office.
Yeah.
And there really isn't any limit on the number of wells that you could drill on the property.
Drinking water
Yeah,
wells.
yes, drinking water wells.
Yeah. Thank you for those clarifications.
Yeah, I was saying, I think there was a lot of confusion because the first letter that I got sent was saying that for rock quarry. And so there wasn't, that's what we originally wrote the letter about. And then, I don't know, it changed, I guess, to this exploratory.
Yeah,
thing.
and
So it was all,
And I could see where you might have come to that conclusion. But it does say that the notice of planning director's decision says a similar use interpretation of the county zoning ordinance to add the following use: operations conducted for the exploration of aggregate resources subject to the requirements. And I could see reading that and not knowing
well, it's
any.
not that, there was another letter before that we got.
Would it have?
Oh.
Yeah.
So, Mr.
Okay,
Mills,
okay,
does
so-
that change?
No.
Aside from
I mean, it's still a lot
the
more, but
basic
yeah,
concerns,
yeah.
right? The concerns around roads and water and all those things.
Solve all those concerns, yeah.
As far as the exploratory thing, yeah, it's.
One additional
Okay.
log truck on our road ruins our road right now. It's ridiculous, so, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, earlier this year, an application was submitted by this applicant for mining operations. They subsequently withdrew that application because they wanted to do more exploration. And so
mining on the.
on the F80 portion
F80
of the
portion.
property.
Okay,
That application was subsequently withdrawn because we'd send out they received some concerns from neighbors and they're like, well, let's hit pause on this. Let's do an exploration of the property and make sure that it's really worth
Mhm.
going down this road. So they withdrew the application. Several months later, they came to us and said, hey, we want to do a complete exploration of this property to see what kind of resources are there. And that's when we sent out the similar use request. So I can see
Nobody
where,
Told us
Yeah.
any of that.
that
Yeah,
makes sense, yeah.
so I can
Yeah.
completely understand why some neighbors have confusion that, hey, we already got this notice. They want to do full mining and now they're coming in with a new application for exploration.
Mhm.
So I completely understand why some folks might be confused, but we were hoping that all of the notices we sent out would clarify that it's just exploration activities and that any sort of mining operations would require a multi-step process to get there.
Okay.
Can I also make
That's
just a little suggestion? If you're gonna put public notice in a newspaper, nobody reads those anymore. Thank you.
I know that, that's a frustration but it still is required by state law.
Right, so help make state law.
And we've talked about, do we do, mass emails, et cetera, but it's required by state law and.
No, I
Yeah.
understand. I
Okay.
understand. I'm just making that statement because I work in a geriatric unit at the hospital and they don't allow us to get newspapers anymore because nobody gets them anymore for our elderly patients who used to love to read the newspaper.
Certainly not as the only way to notify.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Both of
Thank you very much.
I don't have any more questions.
Thank you. Okay, any other testimony in opposition to the application? Hi, welcome. Yeah, go ahead. That's fine. And if you could just state your name and address for the record.
Daniel Harold, I own the 28600 Northwest Mount Richmond Road. It's the property just east of this.
Okay.
I too was confused on, I didn't realize that the first applicant was denied. Wasn't informed of that, so I guess we'll come back later for if this gets approved, which, then, I understand drilling to see what kind of rock you have there, but I would hope that you guys would not approve this because there is a quarry there on the middle part of the property that was. And that's obviously rock that's visible. You can see what it's there. The drilling isn't going to affect anything, but the blast would be the next process is what we're also concerned about is because we have our well is basically a 4-inch pipe coming in a stream. And that's our well, and it goes to the house and our cows. Then also goes down 2 miles to our neighbors. He has an easement for his house and their cows. And so it impacts quite a few people. And I'm sure that well that's on ours pipe goes down to his, and his is not anywhere near the 1,500 feet. He wouldn't get notified. And the only ways he got notified is because I said, hey, this is what's going on. And so I think I don't know how you would notify or find out all that, but there is an public easement that he has water right, and it goes down, I think about 2 miles to his house, and he gets it from the same pipe that we do. So we're just concerned about, and the water is fabulous right now. Don't even need a filter. You can just like drink out of really nice water. So I don't want that affected at all. Well, we don't have to filter it even. So just concerned about that, let alone, blasting later on if this does get approved, what that can affect. But
And,
other than
and
that,
you
it's
live,
just the confusion of the first one not
Yeah.
being that denied, or would have been nice to have some kind of notice that it was,
and you live across the street,
yeah.
across Mount Richmond. Okay.
It's down the hill, but yep, right
Okay.
across from. It's a 28600 northwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just want to make a clarification from what I understand, it wasn't denied, it was,
Withdrawn.
Not denied,
withdrawn.
it's wrong, yeah. Would
so,
have been nice
yeah,
to know,
yes,
know,
I
what's
can
going on.
understand.
Yes.
It's confusing.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
I don't think I have any questions for you, but I really
Yes.
appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you for
Thank you.
staying
Yep,
and
Yes.
to
appreciate
testify.
that.
Appreciate
Okay,
it.
Thanks.
Okay.
And Chair, I do have a question for staff regarding this testimony. So the similar use designation it's very few words, right? And it doesn't, you can explore for natural gas and geothermal. There's no permitting process, right? For that, you can just do it because it's not in the conditional use listed. There's only a few things in the conditional use listed, right? Like
Yeah.
the hill climb.
Any use permitted in the RC zone requires a site design review, so they'd go through a site design review, even if they're doing exploration for a use that's permitted. Any permitted use would go through site design review, and
Right.
we would
Right,
have notified.
a resort or a
Mhm.
drill rig.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but there's nothing in it. I'm thinking specifically about, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but his comments and concerns expressed about the water, about his water situation, that there's not the site design review doesn't really take into account what happens outside of the property.
Right, yeah, and unfortunately, with water issues that come up before this body, we don't have much that we can do to govern water. That's all done at the state level with the Department of Water Resources, and we rely on their feedback and whenever we process an application like this.
I would just like clarify that if we as the decision-making body had concerns about the potential for aggregate exploration as an additional similar use, because those concerns were around water. We probably could decide to not add that similar use. But again, because it's not an approval criteria for adding it, it would easily be challenged, right? I mean, I guess that's what it would be, right? Because it's not an approval criteria.
Right, it's
People's
not
water
an
outside of it.
approval criteria, but the land use isn't perfect. And if you're the Board of Commissioners, we're gonna make the call the best we can, but
Yeah.
there's political view of how are we best administering this program. And so if you've got a different view on it and want to deny it, that's within your prerogative. This is part of the process, but you do want to identify what the reasons are for the denial, which I know you're always very concerned about doing. So
And if I could weigh in, because speaking of process, I'm kind of confused on where we're at right now because, and for tracking purposes, I want to make sure that we're able to get through the testimony portion of this. And I understand that there's a lot of questions for staff and that may come following up, but I'm just afraid I don't want to lose track in the process and have a technical issue with the proceeding. And it might be worthwhile to get through the rest of the testimony.
Yes. Good suggestion, because I do have a follow-up question. So
Perfect.
why
Let's
don't we
probably set
move
it.
to, I did call for other testimony in opposition. So let's move to public agency reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did not receive any public agency reports on this request.
Okay, thank you, Lance. Okay, so now we have the rebuttal by the applicant. If you'd like to rebut some of the comments that have been made or talked about. I do have a couple questions just on process. So if you want to come up and join us. Go ahead with your rebuttal first if you'd like to. So.
Sure. Eric Staley again with NV5. I'm not sure what we would need to speak to for rebuttal so far, because I think most of the concerns were with respect to mining, in particular blasting. Obviously, that's a mining activity. That's not part of the drilling activity. Development of the mine, impacts on the roads, impacts on the wildlife. I mean, we're going to be using the logging roads that are already on the site to access the site for the sake of drilling. So we're not pioneering any new disturbance for the sake of the drilling. As far as water impacts, we looked at a map real quick. The closest boring that we have to the I believe his name is Ken Mills, is about 250 feet. That's not uncommon for drilling when you're drilling a hole, that big. So, like I said, we're going to backfill it with a material that swells and seals the borehole when we're done. So there won't be that, residual opening. I think that's probably enough.
So this is certainly not my area of expertise, but I'm assuming there's a science to this, right? So you're going onto the property. There might be specific areas of the property that would be easier or more beneficial to drill at or in. Maybe that's closer to water. Maybe it's further away from water. I don't know. But I think what Commissioner Kulo's concern is that we have no way to, through the site design review process, to really restrict your activity in terms of, hey, we really don't want you drilling over here by, the creek or whatever, or the water that just naturally flows on the property, or we don't want you drilling near, the road perhaps. So can you talk a little bit about, the science that goes into where you pick these spots, how many spots, and what determines that?
Sure. With regard to streams or other sorts of sensitive areas, outside of any any controls that the county may have, I think there's a state level concern that we not impact natural environments with our activities. So we can't go in the middle of a stream and drill a hole. Number one, it'd be a mess, that we wouldn't learn much, but also there's the downstream, literal downstream effects of what we do in that kind of environment. So we would generally avoid that. With regard to the borehole planning, because we have to have this drill plan submitted in advance and identify spots where we may drill. And if we change that, technically, we need to submit for a change. We generally put more boreholes down than we intend to drill. And that's the case on this property. We have, a smattering of drill sites that generally are located, well, they are located on the logging roads. But as we drill the holes, if we see a general consistency in the subsurface conditions, we would skip one, maybe skip two holes and try to explore the site logically so that we're not just redundantly finding the same conditions over and over again. But at this stage, because we're planning this activity, we have to be we just have to have more holes than we would probably ultimately drill, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Commissioners, any follow-up questions?
I just have one follow-up. If you could address, I can't remember if those in the written testimony or from folks who are here, the relatively recent information from Doug Gammy around ancient slides in the area. And I think it's because of LiDAR gathering activities they've been doing.
For sure.
And
Yeah,
how it might, obviously how in the context of exploratory drilling.
for sure. For sure. I mean, so I'm also an engineering geologist, which means I actually deal with that kind of data a lot. So yes, it is derived from the LiDAR hill shading that you can identify past landslides or even active landslides. For the sake of mine design or developing understanding of a mineral resource, we would generally want to avoid those areas. I, as a geologist, may want to drill one of those areas so that we understand if it is mobile, so that we can see those materials and, contrast them to the areas outside of the disturbance. But identifying those potential slides and exploring them is actually part of the activity. We didn't see any large slides that would be composed of something substantially different than what we would drill otherwise. But that's actually part of what we're going to do, is to try to figure that out. So that's another reason for the distribution of the borings.
Okay, thank you.
So we know there's some, obviously there are some very strict guidelines around the actual mining operations. But in terms of, is Dagami giving any specific requisites for just the exploration so that some of these questions can be put to rest, because we know that you are required by law to either do or not do them for just the exploration?
Yeah. I don't know how long it would take me to find it, but I know there's chapter and verse in the standards for Dagami about what the exploration activities must abide by, that they have to be reclaimed so that the impacts from our drilling activities would be addressed. There has to be a reclamation bond submitted. I believe, I can't remember what the bond is amount, but for the sake of our permit, we had to estimate a reclamation bond to, in the case of, let's say you had someone who explored the site and then walked away. That bond would allow Dagami to hire people to go in and actually reclaim the disturbance. So that's in place. In addition, I've mentioned before that we're going to use this swelling clay. It's called bentonite that seals off the boring. That is actually a water regulatory requirement. So the Department of Water Resources will require that. So there's a couple agencies actually involved in the activities that we're going to do.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
One final question. As part of the staff recommendation, it says that exploration activities shall start no earlier than 8 and end no later than 9:00 p.m. That seems kind of late, but is there some type of scientific reason why you would need to do that late?
I doubt we would drill till 9:00.
Okay, so that might be, we could maybe work on that a little bit. Okay.
Ultimately, we're going to drill when it's safe to do so. And generally drilling in the dark is not preferred.
Right, okay. Okay. Commissioner Cool, any follow-up questions?
No. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the staff recommendation. Sorry.
No,
No?
I'm sorry. No, sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just gonna ask them a question on the time. Because I'm actually.
Okay, well, I think it's a general concern that I will bring up, so. Okay. Okay, so we are now at staff recommendation. Go ahead. Lance.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Bershauer. Based on the testimony and evidence in the record, the applicant has successfully demonstrated that operations conducted for the exploration of aggregate resources in the recreation commercial zone is similar in scale and scope to an existing permitted use in the recreation commercial zone, which are operations conducted for the exploration of oil, natural gas, or geothermal resources subject to the requirements in subsection 404.10. Staff finds that the proposed aggregate exploration use is consistent with the purpose and scope of the underlying recreation commercial zone. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Condition number 1, the exploration activities shall occur at the sites identified on the site plan submitted by the applicant. A new land use application shall be submitted prior to any exploration activities occurring at a site not identified on the site plan submitted by the applicant. Condition number 2, the applicant shall abide by the setback standards provided by subsection 404.10 sub D sub 1 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Condition number 3, the applicant shall abide by the operating standards provided by section 404.10 sub D of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Condition number 4, aggregate exploration activities shall start no earlier than 8 a.m. and end no later than 9 p.m. This condition was crafted in the summer when the daylight hours were a little bit longer, and I'm totally open to modifying those. Condition number 5, the applicant shall remove all equipment and materials associated with the exploration operation from the subject parcel, and the site shall be reclaimed in accordance with Dogami standards. Condition number 6, the applicant shall provide to the planning department a copy of the Dogami exploration permit prior to commencement of exploration activities. Condition number 7, modification of any of the above conditions requires approval of a new exploration permit and site design review under sections 404.10 and 1101 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Violation of any of the above conditions may result in revocation of the exploration permit. And that concludes the proposed recommended conditions of approval.
Great. Thank you, Lance. Okay, so at this point, I will close the hearing and open it up for deliberation. Okay, so just for clarification, if we approve this as a similar use, it automatically is available to other RC zones, but only for exploration, not for mining. And anyone who goes through that process and determines that they would like to mine their property has to go through an individual process that's quite lengthy and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they have to do studies, submit information that the aggregate material is there. We have to amend our comprehensive plan, and if they want to do mining, they have to do a zone change and demonstrate that mining will be safe and that we won't have issues on permitted uses or already exist in the area.
Okay, and that also comes back before us
Yes.
at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, any comments or questions while I'm gathering my thoughts here?
Well, Chair, I just want to thank everybody who came, and I hope that, at least for me, this cleared up a lot of the sort of the misconceptions about what this request is about, so I can understand the confusion. But I'm just really hopeful that, that the neighbors are going, okay, this makes it a whole lot clearer at what the request is, I mean, at least just what the request is. So anyway, my thoughts are that, I feel like a lot of questions were answered, and I'm hoping that the neighbors can have that same measure of confidence.
I do want to address the time, though, the hours of operation for this kind of thing. I think that the hours are too extensive. I'd like to propose that we scale back on those.
Chair, do you have a proposal?
I'm thinking in my mind, this is not, like I
Sorry.
said, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm assuming that drilling in the middle of winter when it's pouring rain is probably not the best use of time. So perhaps in the spring and summer, which would affect the hours. I don't know. I guess I would just say, like an 8 to 6 type of time frame. It's hard. Everybody works different hours, so it's really hard to adjust to that, but
I would agree. I just think that based on, it might be rainy and we might not want to be out there, but I guess geologists and engineers who are digging and drilling this is like no
well,
big deal.
you mentioned drilling into a stream isn't probably the best use of time. So I just think 9 o'clock is too late.
I agree.
So I would propose maybe 8 to 6. Commissioner Kula, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that 8 to 6. I have some other thoughts, but
Okay.
I think that in terms of the time, hours of operation, that's plenty of time.
Okay, so we'll fix that part.
And that's
Um,
not like, the drilling rigs can be on site. That's not all activities. It's as it reads right now, it's aggregate exploration
Right.
activities.
I have questions maybe for Public Works about the road, because it sounds like the road is an ongoing problem. That's not going to hold me up in this process, but I do think that going forward, we need to look at the road concerns.
And I
Okay,
know,
go ahead.
I know from experience that road issues are, if an application to change zoning and identify a significant mineral resource, the roads are a big part of that.
Mhm. And go ahead with your further questions.
Oh, so because it appears that there's in the RC zone, I'm just thinking about the uses right now, that RC zone uses are really concentrated around resorts and eateries and gatherings. And then there appears to be another permitted activity, which is exploration for oil and gas. And then there's conditional uses, and the conditional uses, again, they're a hodgepodge of recreational activities and gathering activities. And I don't know why exploration for oil and gas and hydro or geothermal is in there as a permitted use. If exploration for oil and gas came to us as a similar use, I wouldn't approve it being in the RC zone. Do you have a sense of the history of that?
Yeah, it was the 70s.
Suddenly there's like an orange and red filter on everything.
Well, seriously though, if you read our comprehensive plan and our, early zoning ordinance, a lot of it was, we were just coming off of 72, 73, oil embargo and gas prices climbing from 50 cents to $1. And so there was, you can tell in the early codes and even in the building code, there were all sorts of things about energy and alternative energy. We had solar was, there were solar access corridors that folks were supposed to have, and anyway, I'm sure that's why it was put in there, is they
Okay.
wanted, and they put it in, I think, every zone that we've got. And it
Yeah,
is an
I
odd
noticed that.
thing in this, recreation commercial, you're exactly correct that, it has all of these things that are more gathering and fun and really, it's strange that it's in there, but I'm sure that's why it's in there.
Now we're disparaging the geologists in the room, thinking about this as being not fun somehow. Okay, that is helpful. It does seem like it's something that would be more appropriate, the aggregate for conditional use, but since the oil and gas isn't in the conditional use, it doesn't, I guess my question for you is it possible to have it added as a conditional use? And I'm thinking about the notification specifically.
You could, I'm looking though to Jody,
We're putting her to
to
work
ask,
here.
well, does that mean that they would have to apply for a conditional use? Or, I'm just wondering how that would affect their application.
I do not know, and I don't want to guess
Yeah.
on the record.
Yeah, no, I don't want to guess either. And I think it does mean that they would have to do a conditional use.
We
Is-
can follow up if that's.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about that because of the confusion and just who gets notified and who doesn't, and the process and how the conditional use permit process obviously is more robust around public notification.
And again, are we still talking about the current matter before the board?
Or if
Yeah, because
I think so, yeah.
they can, the board can decide to deny the request. They can decide to approve the request, or they can decide to approve it with some modifications. But I'm also kind of looking at Jody, if they can approve it with that sort of modification, because we didn't send notice out with that. It is more restrictive. And, or do they have only the choice of either approving this request or denying this request? And they couldn't modify it to make it as a conditional use. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. And
Yeah, I'm sorry to press that, but it seems important to me at least.
I can tell you my gut reaction, but this is certainly not something that I know off the top of my head, is you cannot change the application via your decision. You can just put conditions on an approval. So they didn't apply for a conditional use. You can't really change the process now.
They
If
applied
that
for
answers your
a similar use. Because oil and gas was in the permitted uses.
correct.
Yeah.
And I actually think,
Because it's similar to oil and gas.
right, I actually think what you're talking about. No, I don't even want to say that.
Can I just suggest that if the board has this question, that, and I know this has been a long session, but just to grant a small recess, maybe so Jody can step away, talk to Ken, and then come back with possibly an answer. I'm not saying you'd have an answer in 5 minutes, but I do recognize being on the spot right now to give a legal opinion.
I will say, I think she's right, that I
Okay.
don't know that we can modify it, but I also don't mind the sidebar.
Okay,
That's fine.
well, why don't we take a
Okay,
5
thank you,
minute,
I appreciate it.
5 minute sidebar? We'll come back at 1:18.
No, actually, Kenneth is asking you.
Okay, we will resume where we left off for the public hearing. It is 1:21. And we were seeking legal advice.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, we discussed it. I don't think that you can change the request midstream. Do understand the question from Commissioner Kula, can we make it into a conditional use? I don't think we can with this application. However, if the board were to make a decision on this and then direct county planning director to move these two uses from being a permitted use to a conditional use, it does require a measure 56 notice, but that would only go to the recreation commercial zones. There's not that many of them. It's not that big of a lift to do that. It would have to then go to the planning commission and then come back to the board of commissioners. But yes, we could make it so that if the direction of the board was to make these the exploration for oil and natural gas and mineral resources a conditional use in the RC zone, yes, we could do that.
Thank you. That makes sense. And also recognize that notwithstanding everybody's been noticed in this particular situation, right? But I'm realizing that if we don't have that, then it's going to all be attempted word of mouth. So thank you. I appreciate that.
So it
My
sounds like
friend is on actually talking to it.
separate process that might be worth bringing forward.
Yeah. Since if we approve this, it would now be in as a permitted use. But it
Yeah,
clearly people know about it now, but the process was imperfect because it's a different use. Or sorry, it's a different notification process.
right. Okay. Any further concerns? I'm just went through all mine. I think I've checked the boxes on what my concerns were. Obviously, if this moves into the next process, we'll have more, but Commissioner Starrett, any further concerns?
Yeah, no, I think that from my perspective, because this is in many respects it is a similar thing to the oil and gas geothermal, that it makes sense to approve it as a similar use, recognizing that this is just exploration and there's a lot of steps to go and a lot of notification and a lot of hurdles to overcome in order to get to the point of actually extracting.
Right. And it does make a difference that the property is predominantly F80, which does permit this. So
Right, it's that.
it seems
Like, you could do
odd.
one or the other, right?
Seems odd that you'd have an RC zone here, but it sounds like that was from a past failed experiment. So, okay, well, commissioners, I would move approval of the staff recommendation with the exception of the hours of operation to be amended to, so this is item number 3, aggregate exploration activities shall start no earlier than 8:00 a.m. and end no later than 6:00 p.m. Any further discussion?
None, Chair.
Mine is simply that I appreciate the folks, the neighbors who showed up and spoke up. It's really important. And I happened to see there was a letter to the editor, I think at some point too, that I didn't know about until I got in here. So thank you for speaking.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, so schedule findings. Hey, I didn't miss it.
You remembered. I know.
Attorney on this, do we? We have an attorney on? December 1st, fine.
December 1st.
Yeah.
Okay, we will have those on December 1st. Okay, so I will bring us back into our formal agenda. Let's see. That brings us to announcements. Commissioners, any announcements for this week?
Chair, I just want to say that we had the ASA Area Service, Ambulance Service Area Committee.
Excuse me, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our ASA meeting in Sheridan yesterday. I want to thank Noelle for getting that all put together for us. And the West Valley is going to sign their contract with Grand Ron next week. It's a 5-year contract. At this particular point, they have an average response time of 7 minutes and 21 seconds. And they say they have fewer calls than anticipated. We discussed a lot about the ongoing ASA renewal and review and revision of our ASA plan for the county. So lot happened at that meeting. So
Yeah, and if memory serves, wasn't their existing or old response time like 14 or 15 minutes? So they have cut that in
Yes.
half.
Well, they also
Wow.
have areas that are so rural that sometimes response times are 45 minutes. So
Yeah.
what they're trying to do is hope that average goes down to 7 minutes.
Mhm. Great to see that come forward. Commissioner Kula?
I just wanted to let you guys know that the film Elemental, which is about wildfire and homes and how to handle that around your homes, was screened at Linfield with Steve Candela, who's the fire marshal. We both served as like the panelists afterwards to talk about emergency response and what people can do around their homes and kind of next steps. So it's great attendance for it.
Nice.
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
And they found out while they were screening it that NASA invited them to present to their meteorological teams too.
Nice.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay. Ken, any announcements? Nope. Okay. I don't have anything other than reminder to vote. The turnout so far is really low,
But we
like
haven't turned our ballots
shockingly
in.
low. My ballot's in my purse. But so anyway, elections on Tuesday, remember to vote.
Yes.
Okay. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, I will adjourn the November 3rd, 2020. Formal informal session is 1:28